Chapter 11:17. The conversation between Nick and Chun-Ong came from the mirror, and Luke listened carefully. I want to talk to you about the debt of the United States. Nick's voice was very calm. He said to Chun-Ong, in March, China, the European community, and the former Russia talked about the U.S. dollar assets and debt of the Allied countries before the establishment of the Revolutionary Alliance. The Allied countries hold a total of $8 trillion US foreign exchange reserves, of which the U.S. national debt is more than $2 trillion. After the establishment of the Revolutionary Alliance, they imposed a financial blockade on the United States and froze this debt. The United States government wanted to negotiate with the Revolutionary Alliance, but you downgraded the diplomatic level with the United States to the representative level. This has caused a lot of trouble for our negotiation. You know, Chun-Ong replied, the diplomatic relationship between China and the United States used to be one of the most important diplomatic relationships in the world. China and the United States are major countries, and our communication to avoid misunderstandings is indeed related to the global political situation. But this relationship changed 6 years ago. After China returned to the Revolutionary Alliance, the world political situation changed drastically. It was precisely because of the extremely incorrect response and decision made by the United States during that period that the Revolutionary Alliance and the United States were once close to a state of war. The United States froze all the overseas assets of the Revolutionary Alliance and tried to deny the debt relationship, which was the main culprit for this series of misunderstandings. This led to the decision of the Revolutionary Alliance to break off diplomatic relations with the United States 6 years ago. Recently, in order to show friendship, the Revolutionary Alliance re-established diplomatic relations with the United States at the representative level. During that period, the United States government did make an imprudent diplomatic decision. Nick said, but the Revolutionary Alliance also has to bear the corresponding responsibility. It was because of your rash action of attacking the Pacific Fleet that the situation developed to an irreversible extent. The Revolutionary Alliance never fired the first shot. Chun-Ong pondered for a moment. At least in the internal relations of the Earth, we have never fired the first shot. Outside the Earth, in the galaxy, we rarely fire the first shot. But we will not give the enemy a second chance. When the United States intensified the conflict between the two sides, it was the Revolutionary Alliance who stationed the extraterrestrial fleet in the Earth-Moon orbit to control the situation and avoid the arrival of war. Please note that the relationship between the two parties was normalized not because of our concession, but because of our toughness and the consequences of our toughness that the Cuban Missile Crisis was avoided. Nick laughed and said, "This is the reason you used the Soviet fleet to intimidate us?" Chun-Ong nodded and said, "The comrades of the Soviet Union believe that only when we ensure that the U.S. government knows the destructive means of the People's Revolutionary Union will you understand our efforts for peace and not think that this is a provocation." Nick sneered. "So you invited us to pay attention to Mars, then blew up Mars in front of us, and then found a similar planet from the universe to teleport to Mars orbit? This was a blatant threat of slaughter. Do you know how much work we have to do to avoid public panic? Do you know how many reports SHIELD has dealt with by astronomy enthusiasts and astrophysicists? We have to claim that when the Chitauri invaded Earth, they changed the surface shape and trajectory data of Mars." Nick also seemed to feel that what he said just now was a bit of a bluff. So he changed his tone and said in a more relaxed manner, "You know that one of the important tasks of my coming here this time is to have an unofficial dialogue with you. So why don't we be frank? What conditions do you want to promote the normalization of relations between the two sides?" Chun-Ong laughed. "Nick, my old bastard, you are too greedy. The Human Revolutionary Alliance is an interstellar nation, and we have deep prestige in the Milky Way galaxy as well as other galaxies. In the forest of the universe, the Human Revolutionary Alliance is a resounding signboard. We have diplomatic relations with more than 13,000 galactic races, planets, and the Alliance. We dominate a large part of the political ecology of the Milky Way. We have stepped out of a universe and become a respected interstellar political entity. If the U.S. establishes a normal relationship with us, it is equivalent to directly entering the forest of interstellar countries. How can it be so easy? It is impossible for the People's Revolutionary Alliance to recognize the U.S., because if we do, it will mean that there will be one more country on Earth that can compete with us politically. Now, in the stars, those aliens only think that the countries on Earth that are not part of the People's Revolutionary Alliance are primitive civilizations protected by the People's Revolutionary Alliance. You are the Indian reservation in the People's Revolutionary Alliance. If I agree to normalize our relationship and establish relations between the two countries, it is almost equivalent to you agreeing to establish diplomatic relations with the Indians in the reservation in the U.S. That will not happen. Chunong said, "Your only chance was 6 years ago, but you have already destroyed the chance to become a normal interstellar country. Now, in the Milky Way, you're Kashmir, you're the West Bank, and Earth is the bridgehead of the People's Revolutionary Alliance against the apocalypse. Here, only two forces are internationally recognized. The apocalypse, because it is too terrifying, and the People's Revolutionary Alliance. In the parallel universe, we are the main force against the apocalypse. And you are just the natives of Earth, without any political power. Just like the U.S. seizing the Philippines colony from Spain, and the Allies dividing up the German islands in the Pacific after World War I. In this war, no one will care about the natives. Only the interests of one great power will be seized by another great power. And the natives, no matter when, have no power." Nick said with a gloomy face. "This is the reason why you cut off contact with us 6 years ago? What about the diplomatic relations at the agency level? That is the communication channel established according to Earth tradition." Chunong replied, "The relationship between us does not depend on Earth's tradition, but on the level of our internal ranks when you talk to us. In other words, the previous rules of the game are really just the rules of the game in the galaxy. Only what we say counts. And we will not communicate with you on an equal footing, just like how the Queen of England did not communicate with the King of a small country in India on an equal footing during the colonial period, because that will raise your status and make us a joke in the galaxy. Those countries, the Skrulls that we destroyed, the Celestials behind the Kree, and the Xanders, will all laugh at the People's Revolutionary Alliance's diplomatic measures. Of course, this is not a reason. The People's Revolutionary Alliance does not care about their attitude. The People's Revolutionary Alliance only cares about the apocalypse. Before you are liberated from the apocalypse, we will not be able to look you in the eye." Nick understood what Chunong meant. Chunong told him on behalf of the People's Revolutionary Alliance, "Only when you are free from the control of the apocalypse will we recognize you as the basis of all contact. If you're not free from the control, even if the apocalypse turns on a certain switch, you, the test subjects who developed a civilization because of the apocalypse experiment, may suddenly become the puppets of the apocalypse. This way, there is no way to develop a relationship because there is no way to define what you are. A free life? Or something pretending to be a free life." Then, Nick asked, "What about the creditor's rights? In fact, this should be bad news for you. We are considering selling our creditor's rights to Scrooge." Chunong hesitated. Who is he? Nick was confused. A duck alien, an interstellar financial tycoon. When the People's Revolutionary Alliance entered the interstellar financial market, he helped us a lot. He is also our supporter in the interstellar. You may have heard of his nephew, Donald. He is the richest person in America, an alien. The richest person? Nick was confused. But there is no such person in S-H-I-E-L-D-S files. Ha ha ha. Chunong laughed. What do you think rich is? Those worthless U.S. dollars? In the interstellar, people like Stark are poor because he only has U.S. dollars and U.S. dollars. Ha! What can U.S. dollars buy in the interstellar? They won't even sell you a battery. When Stark leaves Earth, he's like a native with a bunch of Zimbabwean dollars. I guess he can only sell his labor to make a living. In the interstellar, he is the type of person with brains, Chunong explained. He is qualified to be a qualified intellectual worker. Chenong seemed to have thought of something and denied. No, 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 it is not Zimbabwean dollars. Zimbabwean dollars are at least recognized in the international financial market. It should be the the shell money used by the South Pacific Island people. The U.S. dollar is a piece of waste paper in the interstellar market. The rich people you know are a bunch of paupers in our evaluation. Donald, on the other hand, has deposits in the interstellar bank and assets in the interstellar. He has several mining planets. Only the capital of such a person is recognized. There is a capital society in the interstellar, but the capital of America is not recognized by the market there, because your capital cannot produce any value in the interstellar market. Capital that cannot produce market value and is isolated from the market. You know what this is? Nick stared at Chenong and said, I know something about the aliens. Earth strength is not bad. With our strength, we should not be discriminated against like this. Yes, Chenong said seriously. You have some strength. As long as you enter the interstellar countries, your U.S. dollars, your capital, and your technology will be recognized. You have the capital, but you cannot enter the interstellar. Without entering the interstellar, your capital does not exist. It is like a company that cannot enter the market. Yes, you have strength in theory, but if you cannot enter the market, you are worthless. You might want to ask, why can't the United States enter the interstellar and become a recognized interstellar country? Because you're too far from heaven and too close to the PRI. After the rise of the PRI, all the major interstellar evaluation agencies lowered your evaluation value. You're now a junk stock, because any political analyst knows that the PRI will not allow their home planet, which is the most important battlefield against the apocalypse, to rise an unknown interstellar country. We cannot determine friend or foe. Who knows if your thoughts are simulated by the apocalypse, and if he moves a finger, you will all become machines under his control? Nick asked with a gloomy face. Then how can Scrooge take over America's debt? Scrooge is an interstellar banker. He controls a very successful duck bank in the Milky Way. The duck bank's main business is to provide packaging services to planets and civilizations that have not yet entered the interstellar, but have the potential to enter the interstellar. They invest in those primitive civilizations with potential, buy them over, and then split their assets. Just like the banks on Earth, they help those civilizations enter the interstellar, causing their worthless assets to increase in value. Scrooge relied on this method to become a financial tycoon in the Milky Way. He controls more primitive civilizations than you know. Chenong said, obviously, he wants to be a junk stock like you. It sounds like he is not a philanthropist. Nick said, yes, he uses this method to control those primitive civilizations, turning them into his gold mine. If the Thanes are robbing by force, and the Kree are robbing by colonization, then Scrooge, as the representative of the interstellar financiers, are robbing and controlling primitive civilizations like yours, Chenong said. So I do not support this idea. It is too immoral. If that's the case, Nick got closer and asked in a low voice, what will Scrooge do? Chenong shook his head. I can't tell you. Think about it. For the most basic dignity of humanity, you cannot let us become a civilization controlled by a galactic capitalist. This goes against your ideals, right? The Human Revolutionary Alliance believes in communism. Chenong was silent for a while before replying, fine, I'll show you that I am a firm believer. He crossed his arms and supported his chin. Scrooge's usual method is to enter your financial system through debt. He will gradually guide you to go public, and in this process, he will deepen his control step by step. Soon, you will all be mortgaging your underwear to him for the sake of going public. How can he control our country's financial system? Nick asked. Even if he has $8 trillion, there is no way we can't win against him. In the financial game on Earth, of course you have played before. Because the rules of the game are set by you, and you are also the referee. You can legislate, change the law, and even nationalize its assets. But if you want to go public and enter the galaxy, you will have to learn another way of playing. You will be controlled by another game. The rules of America will have to follow the rules of the galaxy. Over there, Scrooge is the old player and the referee, Chenong said. That is the rule of the galactic market established by 20,000 galactic countries. You can mortgage your planet and your human rights there. Everything is market-based. Over there, you can even sell Iron Man. Lord Gao buys heroes from various races all year round. He has a Colosseum planet. There are slave duels every day. This is legal. I think Stark is quite valuable. Do you want to consider it? Nick hesitated. Is it legal to sell slaves? There are robbers. You can capture a person and declare that you are his master. He can't resist, and you can sell him. However, this kind of slave usually can't be sold at a high price. Once the slave escapes, you will be responsible for hunting him down. If there is someone backing the slave, like the big civilizations backing their own race, you will be hunted down after you sell their people, and it might even cause a galactic war. There are also mortgage slaves. If they can't pay the loan, their personal rights will be mortgaged to the galactic banks. If such a slave escapes, you will be hunted down by 20,000 galactic countries. You will be wanted by the entire Milky Way. The rules of the galactic game are quite complicated, Chenong said. I can't tell you too much about such important information. You can't win against Scrooge, Chenong said. He has bought more than 200 planets. He is very familiar with this method. If you're stronger and can resist 2 or 3 moves, then you'll have more power. Scrooge's control will be weaker, but if you can't win, then he will be the master of all of you. But no matter what, Scrooge has never lost a single time. He will always make a profit. It's just a small profit. In the Milky Way, Scrooge is already the best expert in going public. Chenong said, do you want to ask why so many civilizations would rather be exploited by Scrooge and go public? Because civilizations that don't go public don't have any protection. They're like an unprotected child with gold. Why do you ask? Even adults can go public. Powerful civilizations can fight their way out and pay a few war reparations. Naturally, they are recognized as sovereign civilizations. That's how the Revolutionary Alliance went public. Nick was in a bad mood. He said, but the Revolutionary Alliance won't let Earth be invaded, so we are safe. No, it's the opposite. You are at the front line of this war. Why do we package the debt and sell it to Scrooge? First, when the Revolutionary Alliance went public, they destroyed many civilizations. First, they destroyed the Chitauris, then started a war with the Thanos, trampled on the front line of the Kree, started wars everywhere, burned glass, blew up planets, evaporated galaxies, and cleaned up the galaxy. From the beginning, we entered the game as the players who set the rules. Scrooge was the first to help us enter the interstellar financial market. He helped us familiarize ourselves with the rules of the game, then set the rules and achieve hegemony. So, with his relationship with us, of course we were willing to let him, who is friendlier and more rational, control you. In our eyes, he is more reliable than you. Second, Scrooge is a good banker. He has never trampled on human rights. Under him, Marika is controlled economically, and it doesn't conflict with your political system. I dare say that most people don't feel that you have lost anything. Third, with your geopolitical situation, you're facing the threat of the apocalypse. Without Scrooge's help, you won't even have a path of retreat, and you could be annihilated in the war at any time. Scrooge took a huge risk to buy trash stocks like you. If it wasn't for the fact that you have a part of Earth's sovereignty, which is recognized by the Revolutionary Alliance, Scrooge wouldn't even be interested in you. Chenong said, as long as the 8 trillion debt is sold, Scrooge will immediately be able to operate the interstellar bank, and the weaker civilizations will be exploited. Perhaps Scrooge has already sold you out, and you still don't know. It's just like how banks bully ordinary people. You have some debt, and the bank will operate it, and before you know it, you'll have nothing. The interstellar financial system is a powerful system supported by 20,000 civilizations in the Milky Way. Chenong continued, let me give you an example. Normally, after the 8 trillion debt is sold, you will definitely do something. You guys will definitely do something. Once Scrooge makes a move, you guys will freeze the debt. In the best case scenario, you guys will freeze the debt. In the worst case scenario, you guys will forcefully deny the debt. Then, Scrooge will question your credibility to the Interstellar Bank. The Interstellar Bank will issue an inquiry, and if you guys ignore it, they might freeze your financial channels to get listed. They will also judge that you have breached the contract. Marika's credibility will go bankrupt in the interstellar market. After the credit goes bankrupt, if you continue to issue US dollars, it will be seen as an untrustworthy currency. This way, Marika's capital will not have any value in the interstellar market. Next, they will forcefully involve you in interstellar affairs, such as setting up a company to build interstellar wormholes and demolish Earth. Of course, they won't do that, because the Revolutionary Alliance is still around. But this way, you will have no choice but to contact the interstellar market. You will need to argue and enter the interstellar system, or else you might be forcefully demolished. At this time, your credibility will go bankrupt, and you will not be able to gain the upper hand. The Interstellar Bank will enforce the mandatory terms and will mortgage the planet you have occupied as collateral for your currency. This is because you have no credibility to use as collateral. Scrooge will apply to exchange for collateral, and the Interstellar Bank will directly ignore your frozen currency and exchange it for collateral. In other words, part of the planet's land rights. If Scrooge continues to short your currency, your entire civilization will go bankrupt. Then, without you knowing, you will be sold to Scrooge. This is the Interstellar Bank. It is toying with you, just like how Marika wants Nauru to go bankrupt. The atmosphere on Nick's side was as heavy as a mountain. Nick said in a low voice, "I will go back and consider what you said. SHIELD hopes that Spear can take over this debt. I will convince the government to unfreeze this debt, and the transfer of the overseas assets of the Revolutionary Alliance will also speed up." Chunong replied, "We will strive to take over the overseas assets and debt and transfer them to the Holy Shield. Believe me, before we are liberated from the control of the apocalypse, the best relationship between Marika and the Revolutionary Alliance is no relationship at all. We will not care about each other, and that is the best situation. Marika's productivity has no value to the Revolutionary Alliance. Value comes from the condensation of labor, and Marika's labor force is already far out of touch with the Revolutionary Alliance. Right now, the average labor force of our citizens has already surpassed the entire Marika, and the resources and ability to change reality that any Revolutionary Alliance citizen enjoys far exceed your entire civilization. In this situation, the US dollar is best used as waste paper. Instead of being packaged and put into the market by us, once we try to extract some value, Marika will be finished. This is inhumane. I will try my best to avoid this situation from happening." Lawyer Luke, who was listening on the other side, was confused. He had no idea what they were talking about. Chapter 11:18. If Justine could see through the mirror to the other side, he would see Chinong and Nick sitting in the corridor with a mirror hanging on the closed door. Inside the room, Circe smelled wax. She raised her hand in the dark and saw that her hand was scarlet. Circe was startled. She sat up and observed carefully, only to find that her hand was full of red rust. It was red mold. She didn't know when the pillow and quilt had been covered with mold. Just as Circe observed the details of the mold on her hand and tried to break away from this illusory world, behind her, the wax figure standing at the door had melted. The white wax melted and dripped, revealing the gray skin under the wax. As the wax fell to the floor, most of the shell on the wax figure had been peeled off. What was revealed was a thin body wrapped in wax, and the white candle tears remained on her facial features. Her face was a stiff gray, and her dehydrated skin and flesh could no longer support the skeleton of the corpse, making her appear skinny and emaciated. When some pieces of wax fell, they tore off part of the skin, exposing part of the body's muscles and bones. The body wrapped in wax slowly turned her head and looked at Circe. At this time, Circe also heard the sound of the wax shell peeling off. Her body stiffened, and she looked down to see the shadow of the wax figure on the ground. The shadow reflected the movement of the wax figure. Circe was not afraid of corpses. Corpses were just dead things for her voodoo materials. She used corpses to make voodoo dolls, which was the core secret of the voodoo sect. Every voodoo sect wizard was proficient in making voodoo dolls, which was an ancient African witchcraft. It was a substitute that wizards used to protect themselves. In the ancient legend of the voodoo sect, there were the priests of the tribe, guarding the door of the soul. Behind the door was death. In order to avoid death, they opened the door of the soul and took away their souls. The wizards used their hair and witchcraft to create substitute dolls, hoping that they could trick death. Even if the wizards were caught by death, they could attach their souls to the voodoo dolls to avoid being caught behind the door. For a long time, wizards had used voodoo dolls to guard the door to prevent the soul gate from being opened. It also prevented the thing behind the soul gate from letting the power of death come out. The voodoo doll wasn't a sealed artifact, but a seal. Since the gate wasn't a physical existence, it was a concept from life to death, and it represented the concept of going from one world to another. Therefore, the ancient tribe where the voodoo cult originated from couldn't have a physical guardian like Wakanda and Ebola. Therefore, they created a voodoo doll that contained the souls of all the voodoo cult's dead wizards. Guard the door. Now, the first and strongest voodoo doll had been snatched away, and the door had also opened. The opening of the door meant that the path from the world of the dead to the world of the living had been opened. It meant that some things could return to this world through the door. This door was formless and intangible, but it was a concept. Anything that had the concept of connecting to another world could be a door. For example, a mirror, or a specific time, the Zhongyuan Ghost Festival, the Night of 100 Ghosts, or a ceremony, lighting a candle at the crossroads. After the door was opened, these concepts that were given a specific meaning by human cultural activities would have a different power. The door wasn't a physical thing, it wasn't something that could be seen or touched, but it was a kind of law of the universe. It represented the law of the universe of death. One day a few weeks ago, Circe suddenly discovered that the door was open. At that time, she was wandering at night, and there was a strange sound coming from the attic. Then, she went up to check. It was nothing because the attic was where she kept her things related to witchcraft. Although it looked gloomy, it was actually very safe. Everything changed on that day. Before that, although Circe was a witch who had taken over someone else's body, she didn't look gloomy or scary. Instead, she looked happy and bright, enjoying life. But on that day, she saw the people she had killed: the kind-hearted nurse Caroline, the young and promising lawyer Luke, the two children who had been burned to death in black bodies by their parents, Violet and Ben Devriox. They appeared in front of Circe, letting her experience the torture they had suffered. If Justine hadn't discovered something wrong and used witchcraft to save Circe, she would probably have died in the attic. From that day on, Circe and Justine knew that they would probably have to fight with these things forever, until they fell into eternal hell and were consigned to eternal damnation. The voodoo doll was a substitute and also a gatekeeper. They made many voodoo dolls and filled all the rooms in this house. They thought of ways to use witchcraft to hide themselves so that they could not be discovered. The voodoo dolls could prevent those things from coming out of the door and also prevent them from crossing the door. Relying on these dolls, Circe and Justine hid from place to place. In order to completely get rid of these things, they needed to perform a witchcraft created by Voodoo Queen Lavelle. Lavelle's blessing. They needed to kill the two people and refine them into a special voodoo doll. Then, they would hide the souls that were targeted by the evil spirits, create a fake soul shadow, and cover the special voodoo doll to deceive those evil spirits. Circe and Justine began to look for candidates to make this voodoo doll, but before they were ready, a young man who claimed to be an insurance investigator came to the door, followed by a black man. They had to change their target. Circe came back to her senses and struggled out of her involuntary memories. She noticed that in this room, all the voodoo dolls had come to life. The voodoo dolls protected them, but at the same time, they were not necessarily safe. The thing behind the door could infect those dolls, making them strange and even dangerous. Circe did not know what kind of danger this kind of voodoo doll posed, because the previous ones had been infected. They had taken care of everything. However, she knew that the voodoo doll could be used as a vessel for souls, and, similarly, it could also be used as a vessel for evil spirits. Cecil didn't even need to think to know that these dolls with evil spirits in them didn't have any good intentions towards him. The corpse in the wax figure began to dance. She tiptoed, spun, and jumped just like an elegant ballet when she was alive. She was an excellent ballet dancer when she was alive, but she later retired due to illness. In despair, the dancer turned to witchcraft in order to return to her beloved stage. The wizard granted her wish, but hid the crueler price. In the end, the dancer was made into a wax figure, fixed at the moment when she danced. Her soul was also imprisoned in the wax figure forever, becoming the wizard's best work, a voodoo doll. As the corpse danced, the tips of her toes supported all the weight of her body. Her stiff body was as flexible as it could be, like a puppet on strings. This made her dance look like a puppet dance. She was as stiff as a mechanical puppet and danced a standard ballet. The corpse dancing in the shadows was a dance of life and death. It was soul-stirring horror and beauty. Why did you go up and dance together? Circe heard her husband, who was lying next to her, whispering. Circe suddenly found that this face was too young, just like Lawyer Luke when he was in his 20s. But what made her afraid was that Lawyer Luke, who was in his 20s, was not her husband. The door opened, and the shaft made a twisting sound. She heard the sound of a spring turning. Click! The slightly closed door was pushed open by a hand, and the figure of Chun Ong appeared at the door. He smiled and walked in with light footsteps. Behind him was a thick shadow, and one had to look carefully to see that it was the shadow of a person. Chun Ong lowered his voice and said, "Are you asleep?" Chapter 11:19. You must be very confused. Chun Ong said, "You have some questions to ask. For example, who are we? What is the purpose of coming here? What do we know? Don't worry, I can answer you one by one." Chun Ong sat in the dark room with his back against the dancing corpses. The dancing demons in the room made him look like a ghost. He said slowly, "You can rest assured that we are not interested in you. We are only here to observe that door. In the entire voodoo cult, there are only a few people who know that the real sealed object is that door. Although the sealed door is open, there are only a few people who can really get close to it." Seeing Nick's puzzled expression, Chun Ong suddenly smiled and said, "You don't think that every mirror can lead to that door, do you? In fact, according to the data found by the Holy Shield, the door has just been opened, so there are very few people who can get close to it. Some voodoo cult wizards in Africa have unexpectedly disappeared. In remote villages in various continents of the United States, some cult organizations have disappeared. Only people like you can get close to the door." Chun Ong looked up and said, "There's a wall between the known common-sense world and the unknown mysterious world. This wall isolates myths, legends, ghosts, and magic, blocking those unknown mysteries behind the wall. But after the soul gate is opened and the things behind the gate are released, the first wave of impact will naturally be you, who are behind the wall. Death still needs some time to break through the wall of knowledge. There is still some time for ordinary people protected by the wall of knowledge to touch the door, but this precious period of safety is not long. That is why I brought him to you. We want to know, what is the door guarded by the voodoo cult? What is behind the door? What secrets do you know about the soul gate and death? And the secret of the fifth seal, who else knows?" Circe said with difficulty, "You are here to investigate the fifth seal. You want to know where the original sin is?" Chun Ong smiled and said, "No, I know where the original sin is. What I want to ask is, who else knows where it is?" Nick raised his eyebrows and said, "You know where the fifth seal is? You didn't tell us. If you want to protect a secret, the fewer people who know, the better." Chun Ong said lightly, "It's best if only I know." Circe said, "So the reason you asked me is, of course, to kill them. In order to protect the fifth seal, all insiders better shut up. Either never say it like me, or die. We don't know more than others. We're just ordinary wizards." Circe begged. "Voodoo wizards are everywhere. The secret of the gate has long disappeared in history, just like that ancient tribe. Let's go." If Mary Laver's left and right hands are also ordinary magi and know nothing about it, then the voodoo cult really has no secrets to speak of. Chun Ong sneered. "You've been following Lavu for so long. She's the founder of the Voodoo sect, the famous Empress Voodoo. As a Creole, the process of Lavelle establishing the Voodoo sect and inheriting the legacy of the Benin Voodoo tribe was a little too smooth. The Voodoo sect is different from the Wakanda and Ebola tribes. It's already strange that you know those secrets. After the Voodoo tribes perished, the seals and culture they inherited were passed down in the ancient religions of Benin. However, without the tribes as inheritances, the ancient legends passed down by word of mouth will lose a lot of key information. I've sent someone to investigate in Benin. The secrets that were passed on orally by the wizards of primitive religions have become a mixture of myths and legends. They are very vague. My men went through a lot of trouble to figure out the existence of the gate from those messy legends and myths, and the Poison Sect's headquarters in the sea actually knows the core secrets of the Voodoo tribe. You even know about the Gate of Souls. This part of it doesn't even exist in Benin. I can't help but guess. There's definitely something wrong with La Vue. She didn't establish the Voodoo sect as a summary and sublimation of the African primitive religions popular in Haiti. But with the secrets she knew as the core, she gradually integrated those scattered primitive religions and created the Voodoo sect. Chen Ong analyzed step by step and exposed Circe's disguise. The fifth seal, Chen Ong said slowly, you shouldn't know about the fifth seal at all. No one in the four ancient tribes knows the secret of the fifth seal. Because during the first mutation of the Stairway of the Sun, in order to avoid leakage, the core of this secret was handed over to the ancient Egyptians for safekeeping, and the remaining parts were scattered among the various ancient civilizations. The secrets kept by the ancient Egyptians were taken into the pyramids by Enchantment. Later, when the Holy Shield reactivated the floating pyramids, they found this part, plus the ones we already have. Only we have all the secrets and know the location of the fifth seal, the original sin. So I want to know where La Vue learned this. What else does she know? Circe said in horror, I can't tell you about Queen La Vue. I can't say it all. If I want to say it, Queen La Vue can take our lives no matter where she is. So I didn't intend to ask you at all. Chenong said, do you still remember those dusty memories that inexplicably appeared in your mind just now? Circe's expression became very frightened. Chenong nodded and said, I did peek into your memory, and I already know most of the secrets. What I want to know now are the things in your mind that are cursed and don't dare to recall. Why would I tell you so much? I just want you to believe. Have you heard of it? In witchcraft, belief is a kind of power. And this power of belief was brought back by La Vue from behind the door. Chenong slowly said in Circe's ear. These words made her struggle violently, but her whole body was stiff and she could not move. And the reason why Circe could not move was that there was still a soul in her body. The original owner of this body, Caroline, who had returned from behind the door. Chen Ong deciphered the secrets in Circe's brain. He began to come into contact with the door. Human thoughts exist in the mind, and all objective reality is based on human perception. The world we know, or rather, the world we know, is the projection of the real world on consciousness. Therefore, our world is composed of two parts, the truth of reality and the truth of consciousness. Some mental patients perceive the same reality as us, but because their way of perceiving the world and internal logic are different from ours, the world they perceive is different from ours. This distortion, based on consciousness and information, will change our world. Based on this, witchcraft will not change the objective world, nor will it change science, but it can change the world we perceive. By distorting the internal logic of our cognition, we could distort the world. And this power of distortion comes from the transmission of information such as language, ideas, beliefs, and behavior patterns. It is similar to the role of genes in the evolution of living things. This concept can be called memes. The so-called gate is not the gate of the soul that leads to death or the gate of life and death, but a gate of consciousness that locks the existence of anti-logic, anti-knowledge, and anti-common sense in human consciousness that goes against the internal logic of logic. It does not exist in the real world, but in each of our consciousnesses. It is the chaotic data that was locked when the apocalypse created human consciousness. Human consciousness is a quantum algorithm. This algorithm follows the laws set by the apocalypse, basic reason and logic. Once this basic reason and logic are lost, human consciousness will become chaotic data, and the window through which humans perceive the real world will be distorted into something indescribable. This basic law stipulates the way humans observe the world and all the concepts humans use to understand reality. Once this door is broken, all the concepts humans have about everything will gradually collapse. Humans will not be able to understand mathematics because mathematics is based on basic logic. The reason why 1 plus 1 equals 2 cannot be falsified and is absolutely correct is because it is based on human basic reason. Once this basic reason is gone, this cognition will also collapse. Mathematics does not originate from the observation of the natural world and reality, but from the basic reason of consciousness. Chun-Ong slowly explained to Nick, without opening this door, human consciousness is an algorithm created by the apocalypse, a black box system. How can the Human Revolutionary Alliance believe you? But once this door is opened, it means the collapse of human basic reason. Just like the collapse of the human immune system, this door is the human consciousness immune system. After the door is opened, the immune system will collapse, and your consciousness will be easily infected by information from the outside world. All the products of human cultural activities, language, words, and the information contained will contaminate your consciousness like a virus. In the past, when your consciousness still had internal logic, you could easily distinguish which information and understand it correctly. But without that door, you will lose the basic ability to distinguish information. At that time, a sentence, a paragraph of text, or a legend can easily distort your consciousness. You're like a system with a firewall removed, allowing all information viruses to infect you. This is the truth of the soul gate. It really is a door that protects your soul. Behind it is not death, but the chaotic data that death sealed when your consciousness was created by the order of the apocalypse. Memes are not scary. It is a normal method of information transmission. But once the soul gate, the firewall of consciousness collapses, then memes become scary because they can infect our basic reason, and memes become emetic viruses. Chun-Ong said to Nick solemnly, "Can you imagine that a sentence I say to you, a line of words you read in a book, can change and distort your consciousness? Can you imagine that a short piece of information can turn you into a psychopath?" Modern society is an explosion of knowledge and information. People receive a huge amount of information every day. Once this firewall is closed, they will be receiving a large number of memetic viruses at every moment. In less than a day, all humans in the apocalypse era, the new humans, will become crazy. This is the second impact of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Now, the wall of cognition, or in other words, common sense, will replace the firewall to protect humanity. It may only last for a week. After a week, the wall of cognition will collapse, and human consciousness will be unprecedentedly fragile, facing the test of the apocalypse. You must find a way for humanity to survive. Some of the people in the Revolutionary Alliance were also created by the apocalypse, which is why we do not distinguish between the new humans and the old humans. The Republic has already issued the first human consciousness safety warning, injecting the internal population with a consciousness vaccine, artificially creating a conscious immune system. Nick, we will lend a helping hand, but you must first strengthen yourselves. We will only act at the last moment. Chapter 11:20. Nick's face turned pale. Chun-Ong comforted him. "I hope you don't hate me." Nick looked up. "Why do you say that?" "Because the more you know, the more dangerous it is. Humans can't know these things, but humans must know before they can solve it." Chun-Ong sighed. "The more you know, the more dangerous it is. This is not an empty saying. You're still safe now because you haven't realized it yet. The firewall of consciousness, or rather, the locked chaotic consciousness data, allows human consciousness to be protected in a safe system. Of course, you can also think of it as a shackle. In any case, you're protected in an orderly and understandable world. But now, the shackle that protected you has disappeared. Now, Human consciousness and rationality are operating on inertia. This inertia is what I call the wall of knowledge that protects you. It can also be called common sense. Because common sense, humans haven't started to let their imaginations run wild and retain some resistance to the mimetic virus. Once you overturn common sense and start letting your imaginations run wild, you'll find that there's nothing to help you distinguish between these things. You'll enter the world of mental patience, unable to break free from the world where your consciousness is distorted. Nick didn't dare to think about what Chenong said. It was best not to think now. Once he did, he would be doomed eternally. But he had to think. Only by thinking could he find a solution to the problem. With the collapse of the firewall that protected human consciousness, humans would no longer be able to understand the world rationally and distinguish between reality and fantasy. Mental patients often create illusions and distort reality. A mental patient with abnormal consciousness might believe that there are countless pairs of eyes watching him. He would be nervous all day, suspecting that someone was spying on him. The reason normal people wouldn't be like this is because our consciousness still has basic rationality. We can tell that the information is our imagination, but once we lose this ability, we'll see a pair of eyes from a poster hanging at home or some other place, but we lose the ability to distinguish. We can't tell if it's our imagination or not. Then we'll really see a pair of eyes. We've entered the world of mental patience. We begin to lose the protection of common sense. We begin to blur the real eyes and the eyes in portraits, TV, and photos. We'll see that there are eyes everywhere in the world. Our consciousness begins to warp and distort. From this point on, the entire normal world collapses. Some concepts in our consciousness will be distorted, such as the eye. Anything with a hole in it, anything that looks like an eye, will appear to us as an eye. Then we will be surrounded by eyes, and the concept of eyes will be completely distorted and out of control. Then there will be other things. We will not be able to tell which things are people. People have eyes, but now there are eyes everywhere. Then the concept of people began to distort. What was a person? People could not tell. The posters hanging on the wall were regarded as people, and the people walking on the street were regarded as indescribable things. If you can't tell what a person is, then what is a murder? What was killing? Bumping into a mosaic on the street. What was that? Just crush them. This was a world of lunatics. Everyone could lock up a lunatic, but what if everyone was a lunatic? Cognitive disorder, distorted consciousness, close to insanity. No matter how hard Nick tried to stop himself from thinking about it, he still gradually understood Chenong's consciousness. The wall of common sense that protected his consciousness, which was already exceptionally weak in the first place, collapsed. He had also come into contact with the gate of souls and those irrational things. His face was pale. Nick was a man made of iron, but he was still shocked by what he thought of. Chenong quickly held him down and said, "Don't think too much. Don't imagine the world after the virus spreads. Once you imagine it, you might really be able to see that world. You will go crazy. You will think that everyone is a lunatic. You will lose the concept of the difference between a lunatic and a human. You will not be able to tell who is a lunatic and who is a normal person. You've caused me so much trouble," Nick said anxiously. "You've really caused me so much trouble. Don't be nervous. You will go crazy if you are nervous." Chenong said, "You have to overcome these difficulties with your own strong willpower. Nick, you are the person with the strongest willpower I have ever seen. If you're also driven crazy, then you will not be able to escape. If you're also driven crazy, is there still hope for humanity? You also know about this?" Nick grabbed him and asked, "Why won't he go crazy?" Chenong did not dare to say that he had caught the wrong person. Seeing how Nick was holding the dancing corpse, he knew that Nick could no longer tell the difference between a human and a ghost. He tried his best to console him. "I am an old human. My consciousness was not created by the apocalypse, so there's no such gate. Nick, you're the first Homo evolutus to know the truth. Only by overcoming these difficulties can we have hope." The truth that Chenong told Nick was also a kind of information, a meme. This meme could also infect the defenseless Nick. His wall of common sense collapsed. His consciousness broke away from the inertia and started the process of collapse. Chun-Ong carefully covered Nick's eyes and ears. He had to accept as little information from the outside world as possible and think as little as possible. This was because the information from the outside world was a meme virus to him. So were his memories. But this went against the reason why Chun-Ong told Nick the truth. He hoped that after Nick knew the truth, he would come up with a solution with him, but now he could not even think about it. Nick had entered the first stage of the infection, cognitive disorder. Chun-Ong could not tell Nick that the person he saw was a ghost, because it was still fine for him to see a ghost as a human. For now, a ghost was a human to him, but once he realized it, he would not be able to tell the difference between a human and a ghost. Everyone could be a ghost to him, and the concept of a human would be distorted. But Chun-Ong could not hide it from Nick forever. He was a smart person. He felt the hand that he was holding. The flesh was flipped up, and he felt the bones and rotten tendons. It was cold to the touch. He knew that he was holding a corpse. He could not tell the difference between a human and a ghost, the kind that would mistake a human for a ghost. There are so many people here. Nick's tone was cold. In Nick's consciousness, the surrounding environment changed. He was blindfolded, there were no doors or windows around him, and there was no light. He smelled the smell of decay. This smell came from the wax corpse, and it quickly connected with the corpse in his memory. Then the walls and floor, made of flesh and bones, started to appear. He stepped on a human face and a rotten skeleton. This was an illusion created by Nick's sense of smell after he lost his sight and hearing. But it was not an illusion for him. The memory of the corpse created by his sense of smell started to replace some of his cognition. A dancing ballerina appeared before Nick. She had a pretty face and was smiling at him vividly. Chapter 11:21. At this moment, Circe crawled up from the bed. Her head was hanging upside down, her neck was bent towards her back, and her limbs were also bent backwards. Her joints looked like they were broken, vividly depicting a body with its elbows turned inwards. Even so, Circe's eyes were still moving. Upon closer observation, one could see that this state of the witch was related to Nick's understanding of her. In Nick's eyes, this strange appearance was not just a mutation, but a deeper display of the witch's original face. Caroline's face had already festered, and only a rough outline could be seen. This seemed to indicate that the witch's disguise had been seen through. And under the rotting, leaky face, where the previous face had been broken, another face had been sewn over. It was the face of an even older Madame Violet. She was full of wrinkles, her hair was white, and her teeth were uneven. The two faces were like a mask full of holes that had been sewn together. Black threads had sewn over the festering areas, and where the two sewn faces could not cover was a pair of eyes. Nick could even say that he was very familiar with this pair of eyes. They were the eyes of the brother and sister, Martin and Grace. They were exactly the same as the one in the photo. This was also evidence that what Nick saw was the information in the depths of his heart, which had been processed by his mutated consciousness. A normal human would only see an ordinary woman, but what Nick saw was his subconscious's dissimulation of what he saw. That was why he could see Caroline's and Violet's faces. Caroline's face was very clear, and it was the witch's current appearance. It was also the appearance that Nick had always seen, while Violet's face was very blurry. It was a blurry face, and all the characteristics came from the information that Nick knew. She was close to 60 years old and had suffered a stroke. She was an old woman. In the end, it was this blurry image that was pieced together with Caroline's clear face. Because Nick had never seen Violet's photo, he did not know what she looked like. As for Grace's eyes, it was obvious that they came from the photo. Therefore, the part of the witch that represented that she had seized Grace was still in her childhood state. This gave her a pair of childlike eyes, and when placed on that old and ugly face, it was extremely terrifying. The skin on her body was loose, as if it had been sewn together from human skin. Underneath the human skin was black, rotting skin. The faces and eyes that were sewn up like masks represented that in Nick's mind, the witches had taken over the bodies and identities of those people. She wore a human skin coat, but it couldn't cover her black skin. This was the image of Circe in Nick's subconscious mind, A black witch wearing human skin with someone else's face, a thing that used someone else's skin to cover her rotten body. Everything Nick saw seemed to have been crushed and reassembled by a crazy artist. What he saw was probably a world that had been reworked and created by the crazy Picasso. As for Carolyn's evil spirit, it grew out of the witch's rotting stomach, dragging her intestines and her whole head out of the abdomen. This was not from a subconscious mind, but a kind of spirit vision. Chun-Ong revealed that Carolyn and the other evil spirits weren't real souls, but the fears and fantasies of Cersei and the others. They thought that the door led to the world of the dead, and they misunderstood the meaning of death, so their fear distorted their consciousness and created those evil spirits, or rather, they created the door through which the evil spirits came out. However, human consciousness was common, and what they created out of fear was also a meme. This kind of virus could be transmitted to others, and even the old humans who didn't have a door would see the evil spirits that the wizards saw in their hallucinations. This kind of meme would infect everyone who came into contact with it, and it would create the effect of a real evil spirit taking revenge. As for Nick, the old Nick who had lost the protection of common sense, this kind of spirit vision ability was greatly enhanced. He could see the memes created by the infected, and he could also see the evil spirits created by the witch's fear. The evil spirits attached themselves to Cersei's body, and they showed such a terrifying effect. Nick didn't lose his mind because of what he saw. On the contrary, he kept restraining himself and kept himself in a state of not doing anything. But he wasn't the only one who heard the fatal truth. When Chun-Ong said these words, he didn't avoid Cersei and Justine. Their IQ was a little lower than Nick's, and they needed a little time to think. Then the two poor people who were protected by common sense were kicked into hell. They also lost the inertia of their consciousness and looked directly at the truth and chaos of the world. Cersei clearly saw the head growing out of her abdomen, and Carolyn smiling at her, endless hatred in her smile. Then she felt the human skin on her body began to wriggle. This was the other evil spirits that she had taken over, and they attached themselves to these human skins. She felt that she was coexisting with those evil spirits and felt that they were sticking to her, growing on her skin. They coexisted with each other. Cersei screamed. In Nick's eyes, she opened her mouth wide, and the mouth was so wide that a head could be stuffed inside. Her mouth was full of uneven teeth, yellow, deformed, and ugly teeth. Cersei began to desperately peel off the skin. In Chun-Ang's eyes, she was tearing off her own skin. In the eyes of the three people present, there were three different worlds. In Chun-Ang's eyes, he saw Cersei pulling her skin, tearing it off bit by bit with unimaginable strength. In Nick's eyes, Cersei was a monster trying to tear off the human skin on her body. In Cersei's eyes, she was a normal person. This was probably the only thing that was still protecting her from common sense. The skin on her body was some human skin monster that wanted to grow into her body. She had to peel it off. Cersei had gone crazy. Her cognitive world was completely messed up. Her consciousness had created some mimetic virus, some monsters that distorted her world, and she could no longer tell the difference between the distorted world and the normal world. Chun-Ong watched as Cersei pulled off all the skin and muscles on her body, turning herself into a skeleton covered in blood and flesh. Chun-Ong did not know what kept her from dying, but in the eyes of Nick and Cersei, Cersei, who had peeled off the human skin monster, revealed her true appearance, a corpse that looked like a mummy. Because they all knew that after peeling off the body that had been taken, the essence of Cersei was a body that should have rotted long ago. At this time, in the eyes of their distorted consciousness, Cersei's appearance somewhat overlapped with her appearance in reality, a rotten, bloody, withered, skinny skeleton. Cersei's skeleton, a skeleton with some flesh still hanging on it, fell to the ground. In the eyes of Chun-Ong, she was already dead, but in the eyes of Nick and Cersei, she was still alive, just in a different form. Nick had realized, and there was nothing he could do about it. The rotting, maggot-infested corpse of Cersei the witch, the dancing girl, the halfling crawling under the bed. That Luke the lawyer, a young lawyer, had shared the body with J.S. Tiff, and then J.S. Tiff had given half of it back to Luke the lawyer. He dragged only half of his body, his intestines leaking out of his abdomen, and crawled on the ground. Nick would never be able to destroy these things. This was not something that could be destroyed with guns or superpowers. It was a kind of innate thinking mutation, and soon he would get used to it. The people in his eyes would mutate into his subconscious understanding of their nature. In his eyes, there was no difference between life and death, and there was no difference between a corpse and a human. A person was a corpse that moved, and a corpse was a person that did not move. This kind of state could be exchanged at any time. A person's past, present, conscious things, and physical things would be revealed at the same time, turning a person into an abstract piece-together thing. His world was like Picasso's painting. In the future, more consciousness and concepts would appear in his world in the form of abstract entities. Those nothingness concepts, time, good and evil, life and death, would exist in various symbolic and distorted states in his cognition. All the rationality that humans possessed, the perception of time, the perception of color, the concepts of shape, temperature, and life, would exist in a distorted and indescribable state. Everyone existed in the form of monsters in Nick's eyes. But soon, Nick's cognition would be confused, and soon, he would no longer feel strange or afraid. He would completely forget what a normal person looked like. Now, in Nick's eyes, Chun-Ong was countless bubbles gathered together, countless lights gathered into something that could not be seen clearly. He said to Cersei, "I'm sorry. I seem to have hurt you by mistake." He turned to Nick and said, "You used to be a system that the Creator created with steel and fire in the apocalypse, a system with a strict structure and orderly operation. That was your consciousness. Now, the many elements that make up your consciousness have become something disordered and chaotic, but you still have to maintain your clarity and rationality, or else the future of humanity will be like what you see now, a distorted monster." The heavens' enlightenment extracted order and rationality from primal chaos to create your consciousness. After returning to primal chaos, you were able to maintain your consciousness and recreate yourselves. Perhaps this was the heavens' enlightenment's test for you, Chun-Ong said. "What is this?" Nick thought in confusion. The programmer created an AI from chaos, then messed up the AI's code, washed it into a chaotic state, and expected it to recreate itself. What kind of fantasy is this? At this moment, Nick sincerely hoped that his god was the monkey that sat in front of the typewriter and kept on typing, creating them out of the countless possibilities in his mind. It was not a programmer or scientist who relied on reason and wisdom to create them, and then began to run and test them, carrying out all kinds of whimsical tests to wash the artificial intelligence into a chaotic algorithm and create itself again to carry out such a sensational act. Why can't our God be a monkey? The monkey would create chaotically, then end chaotically, and the monkey god would press the button to destroy everything at some point, but Nick could accept this. This was an unknown fate. But a scientist was God. He would start from a rational and orderly start, create with precision, and then experiment repeatedly, hoping to see the results he expected, something unexpected or expected. Just like a white mouse facing a researcher, an unknown fate, it was someone else's prank. As one of the lab rats, Nick sincerely hoped that his fate could be controlled by a monkey. Chapter 11:22. Nick felt a warm and soft sensation beneath his feet, as if he was stepping on his internal organs. The entire floor of the mansion had turned into a slippery, wriggling material. The ceiling above his head was a mass of lumps of flesh that looked like tumors, wriggling like soft flesh at the throat. Nick's lower body had turned into a slug-like axe leg that slithered on the surface. He felt as if he had become a mollusk. "Your condition is starting to get serious." The being that seemed to be piled up from countless bubbles that were as deep as the universe and as bright as the sun said, "But it's fine. If the consciousness of an ordinary person is some scattered sugar, you are that kind of hard, ice-cold sugar cube. Under the impact of this chaotic information, you can hold on a little longer. The fact that you can still maintain your consciousness means that the consciousness inertia that sustains your rationality has not disappeared. That is why there are only initial symptoms of cognitive disorder. If this continues, you can last for 3 days before the confusion in your consciousness will further deepen, provided that you do not directly face those aberrant mimetic viruses. The situation is still good. The voice said, "It's not as bad as I thought." "You call this the situation is still good?" Nick said, "I suspect that I have already gone mad. Those who have truly gone mad do not know that they have gone mad." Chenong said, "Right now, you can still distinguish that you have entered an abnormal state. I originally expected that you would completely distort your cognition and not realize your abnormality. It would be like a dream, thinking that all the absurd situations you encounter are normal. How are you going to explain to SHIELD in that situation?" Nick said, "Are you going to let me, who has already gone mad, go back? I will give you a device to manually interfere with cognition." Chenong took out a pair of glasses. "Use this pair of glasses. Through calculation and simulation, it will interfere with your vision, filter out the mimetic viruses, and manually interfere with the information you have obtained. It is like installing a device to manually filter harmful substances in your consciousness." Nick put on the glasses, and the whole world returned to normal. Although it still appeared distorted, dark, and bizarre, at least it looked a little more normal. Nick ignored the walls with faces on them, and the chandelier above him that was twisted like a skeleton. The floor under his feet had also returned to normal, except that it was filthy, bloody, and wet with moss. Nick looked at the slug covered in black mucus crawling over his feet, and his face twitched. "It's much better now. Really." He saw Chun Ang's head glowing like a light bulb. "You subconsciously feel that this place is dirty and dark. You feel that there are a lot of germs and microbes here, and your spirit vision distorts these feelings. The bloodstains on the walls, the slugs and moss on the ground, they're all symbols projected by your spiritual perception." Chenong said, "And the soul door in your consciousness has been opened, and it has also released your consciousness shackles." "What do you mean?" Nick asked. "You can sense some information that was previously suppressed by common sense. Other than the 5 senses, humans also have conscious senses. Before the shackles are released, the things that the consciousness observes will be forgotten and occasionally appear in the form of dreams. This is the reason why the 5 senses relax the suppression on the consciousness during sleep, allowing these things that you previously couldn't sense to surface." Chenong explained the reason with knowledge that leaned towards mysticism. Seeing that Nick still didn't understand, he added, "In layman's terms, your spirit vision can see some clues that normal people can't. Spirit vision is a kind of distortion of consciousness. It's the result of distorting your 5 senses and adding them to your senses. It contains many elements of illusion and madness, but it also contains some extraordinary senses that belong to rationality." Chenong said, "It's very dangerous, but it's also very useful. How long can this pair of glasses protect me?" Nick asked calmly. Chenong was silent for a moment before answering. "If you don't look directly at things that contain more chaotic information and more powerful memes, it can maintain your basic rationality for a week. This thing takes over my information receiving window, in other words, my senses. By interfering with my senses, it filters out those harmful mimetic viruses." Nick said, "Doesn't that mean that you know everything that I sense?" Chenong nodded. "Yes. The artificial intelligence in the Republic will filter the information you receive. If you feel that it's inappropriate, you can return it to me. Then I won't be able to work at all." Nick said coldly, "A large number of illusions and disturbs my cognition. If I can't distinguish what appears in front of me, why the hell would I still be the director of S.H.I.E.L.D.? The current director of S.H.I.E.L.D. is Coulson." Chenong reminded him. "To hell with him." Nick adjusted the color of the lenses, making them as transparent as a pair of sunglasses. "Now that the situation is critical, I have to do it myself. I will isolate myself from the most confidential information. Don't even think about getting anything through me." Although Nick said so, he knew that he had to expose some secrets to the Revolutionary Alliance. Not because of anything else, but because he had to choose the lesser of 2 evils. Letting the Revolutionary Alliance, know some of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s secrets was better than letting all humans go crazy. Nick walked out of the mansion. This time, he finally understood what it meant by, you know too much. Nick had never experienced such a terrible danger of knowing too much. The sky was already slightly brightening. If the sun rising from the east was still the sun, it looked more like the mouth of a well, as if there was a hole in the sky. Light and some other things flowed out from the hole, as if the wound in the sky was bleeding pus. The moon in the sky had not completely set yet. Nick glanced at it. He immediately felt that his spirit vision had deepened a little. What the hell was that? A wriggling ball of flesh full of tentacles with eyes of all sizes growing on it. When Nick looked up at it, some of the eyes were also looking at him. An indescribable feeling, like being massaged by a giant squid, enveloped Nick's whole body. What the hell is that thing? Nick cursed in horror. The moon, Chenong said lightly. That thing looks like this. Why does the moon look like this? Nick said, what the hell is on it? On the moon. What the hell is there? It has always been like this, but with your spirit vision, you can see more of the truth. That's all. F***CK. Nick cursed. Chenong raised his watch and glanced at the projected information. Your rationality has weakened again. Don't think about those things. Now is not the time to know as much as possible. On the contrary, the less you know, the safer you will be. That thing has always been watching us from the moon. Nick's tone was grim. It has been like this since ancient times. Chenong was a man of few words. The more he spoke, the faster Nick's rationality fell. I have to close that door before I go crazy. Nick held the cigarette in his mouth. He ignored the wriggling, smelly, dirty, slimy smoke that was like a worm. He gritted his teeth and inhaled the putrid smell. How many people in S.H.I.E.L.D. can bear the truth? Chenong asked. If you fail, we need to find someone else to take over your job. At least one person must know the truth. Nick thought for a long time. His mind was already a little chaotic. Coulson can't do it. Damn it, I can't think of anyone who can last more than 2 days. The minds of agents are too complicated. They store more information, and the wall of common sense is not strong enough, Chenong said. The simpler the person, the stronger their resistance. The more stubborn the person, the less likely they are to go crazy. Stubborn. Nick took a deep breath. Then it can only be my old buddy, Frank. He is the most stubborn person I have ever met. The Punisher? Chenong said. Yes, he may be more twisted than a normal person at the beginning, but he has a higher tolerance for the later infection and can resist it longer. You need to give Frank some authority, then return to S.H.I.E.L.D. and deal with some matters. Chenong said calmly. Then we can start looking for a solution to the problem. Lavelle? Nick asked. Chenong did not say anything, tacitly agreeing with Nick's guess. After a long time, when the big hole in the east, the mouth of the well, gradually shifted to the middle of the sky, Chenong said, Lend Dr. Reed to us for a while. What for? Nick frowned. He is researching teleportation technology. That's too simple. The Republic has been monitoring the space around Earth. This can't be hidden from us. It looks like he is about to succeed. I want to push the boat with the current and let him test the waters for us. Where are you going to take him? Nick asked. Chenong did not answer directly. Do you know? We don't have enough time to solve the riddle now. We can't solve the questions set by the Death Knight. We can only copy the answers. Right now, we can only be bad students who are ready to copy the answers next door. Let's pray that the examiner doesn't pay attention to us. Send Reed over and pretend that it is an experimental accident. Nick's eyes darkened, and he interrupted thoughtfully. He nodded slightly. Creating such accidents, we are professionals. Reed is our beacon. Chenong said. I will pretend to stop Ulysses from opening the fourth seal. We need to protect the hero's wall of common sense, so we can't let them know the truth. There is no point in stopping the fourth seal. The test has begun, and we can't delay it. I will trick them over and use a reason similar to the final battle to gather the opposition on Earth that has given us a headache with them, and then send them over. I will be responsible for guiding them step by step to find the answers we need. At the same time, hide the situation, and delay the collapse of their wall of common sense. You are responsible for cooperating. If they feel something is wrong, I will jump to the other side, and you will be responsible for guiding them. Jump to the other side, Nick said doubtfully. Can you do it? Chenong grinned and clenched his fist. Being a villain, I'm super professional. Nick was still doubtful. Won't Ulysses Crow, Ebony Ho, and Namor cause trouble for us if we send them over? Now, it is time to make use of them. Chen Ang's eyes flickered. I will make them helpless. When necessary, I will beat them until they are convinced and then stand up to lead them. Doctor Strange is the easiest person to discover the truth. We still need him later and the power of the time gem, so he can't go crazy. Because he used the time gem too much, he has been targeted by something outside of time. When the time comes, I will banish him outside of time, and when necessary, you can pull him back. Just say that I am the mastermind behind everything. That should be able to deceive him for a while. Nick's expression was uncertain. He said solemnly, my current state is too dangerous. I can go crazy at any time. If something happens to me, there will be a big flaw in the plan. Chenong said, go find Dr. Strange and tell him that you suspect there's something wrong with me. Get him to help you suppress your chaotic consciousness. Strange has studied the 7 chapters of Mystic Lord, so he has a way to help you maintain a portion of irrationality. Tell him that I lied to you about the information and caused you to be infected by the evil gods. You can only come out when necessary. Too early or too late will affect our plan. Chapter 11:23. Chenong left at some point, and only Nick stayed in the small town. He sent an encrypted message. Soon after, a shield Quinjet came here and hovered over Nick's head. Nick glanced at the Quinjet, which looked like a huge weird bat in his eyes. His dark face twitched, and he grabbed the rope that the Quinjet had put down and climbed up. Just as he was about to reach the hatch, a hand reached out and pulled him back. Nick got on the plane and looked at the person who pulled him up. It was a former agent of S.H.A.L.A. Clinton Francis Barton, also known as the Avenger codenamed Hawkeye. Nick resisted the weird image of Hawkeye in his eyes. It was still difficult for him to distinguish other people from their appearance. How many people would believe that the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D. suffered from face blindness? Barton May. Nick greeted Hawkeye and May, who was piloting the plane. Barton asked, why did he call you here? Nick sat down and looked at Hawkeye. You don't believe him? Hawkeye's face was gloomy. He pulled his bow and said, since the moment my family was killed, I don't trust anyone. The Skrulls won't come to me for no reason. Someone must have betrayed me. I don't even believe you. When I saw them die in front of my eyes, I was no longer the superhero I used to be. Hawkeye, who survived, is an Avenger, a madman. To tell you the truth, I haven't even given up my doubts about you. Nick said, why? Just because I came out and saved you when you were about to be killed by the Skrulls? Hawkeye did not hesitate. It makes me wonder, can you also save my family? Nick sighed and said, I admit that I've been paying attention to the Skrulls. Over the years, I have mastered some information about the Skrull spies, but they have not been used, and I can't act rashly. Otherwise, I will lose the only clue I can investigate. I didn't think that they would. When I discovered their movements, I only had time to save you. Nick looked into Hawkeye's eyes and said, I wouldn't do such a thing. Not ever. I just understand the Skrulls. If there's anyone on Earth who deserves to understand them, it's me. Do you see this blind eye of mine? It was all thanks to them. That was the last time I trusted someone. You suspect him. Nick asked why. Hawkeye said, someone betrayed me. This is my intuition. He is also untrustworthy. He is a member of the Human Revolutionary Alliance. He came to the West to form the Holy Shield. He gathered us together and knows us like the back of his hand. But what do we know about him? Knew nothing. I hate people who know nothing about them. The unknown will make me feel danger. So after you saved me, we tacitly concealed the fact that I was an S.H.I.E.L.D. because I no longer trust Holy Shield. And you? Maybe it's because you don't believe in the sacred shield. Nick was silent for a while and changed the topic. This topic is not suitable for me to talk too much about. May, submit a plan of distrust against me, and isolate some confidential information from me. Lower my authority to the level of a level 10 agent. Say that I proposed it myself. Nick took the encrypted laptop and verified fingerprints and irises, but there was a logical problem with the verification. Palm prints and irises were sometimes unreliable. Although the password and password were traditional, it was more confidential. In order to prevent mind control, verification needed to be very logical. Nick failed twice, which aroused the vigilance of Hawkeye and May. Nick saw that they were on high alert and laughed. If I didn't have a damn problem, when I make such an application, have a little faith in me, okay? The two reacted. If Nick was controlled, he really didn't have to remove his authority first. But Nick's next words made the two vigilant again. If one day I lose control, don't hesitate. Kill me. Nick said. What'd you talk about? May asked nervously. We talked about something that you absolutely can't know and don't have the authority to know. Only I, and maybe Frank in the future, know about it. If I lose control, go find Frank and cooperate with his action, Nick replied. May, who knew the confidentiality rules of agents, immediately shut up. Nick leaned tiredly on the back of the seat of the plane. He pressed his temples and slightly relaxed his rationality against the chaos. He had to concentrate on fighting against the messy murmurs in his mind. Even with the equipment provided by Chun-Ong, the opening of the Soul Gate was still very dangerous. He had to fight against madness and chaos at all times. The Punisher was hiding in his safe house. He had been tracking down the missing Daredevil Matthew for almost 3 years. While constantly fighting crime, he also had to investigate his missing partners. Frank was really busy, but today, he had an uninvited guest. Nick put down his hat and sat opposite Frank. Ha ha. Frank, my old friend, you didn't expect me to visit you today, did you? Frank was not polite to him. You're definitely not looking for me for anything good. Do you want coffee or tea? Don't lie to me. You only have plain water here. Nick leaned back in his chair and took the plain water that Frank handed over. Frank, in the next few days, I might have some accidents. If I lose control, if this person will contact you, is he reliable? Of course not. There is no one more unreliable than him in this world. You don't have to trust him. Just keep talking to him. You can be suspicious, you can be vigilant, but you have to keep talking. If he contacts you, no matter what he says, you have to listen and then act according to your style. Frank said in a low voice, It's hard to see such a weak side of you, Nick. Nick sighed. That's because you don't know what we're facing right now. Weak? I used to deny that I had these emotions, because once you admit it, you'll really become old. But now, I don't care about this anymore. So be it if I'm weak. Believe me, weakness is the most insignificant mental problem I'm facing right now. When did you become as weak as Tony Stark? Frank said, This isn't like you. Nick. Anthony Edward Tony Stark. Nick repeated the name. He's no longer trustworthy. Nick said coldly, I didn't know how serious his mental infection was before, but now I know. Tony can't hold on. He's gone crazy now. Hawkeye suspects that someone betrayed him. I suspect it too, but I have a suspect. Frank said solemnly, Stark. Nick's face fell. Yes, unbelievable. Howard founded S-H-I-E-L-D, and I actually suspect his son. That person and I are going to do something big. Nick said, Who? Frank's words were concise. I mentioned it before. The person who might be in contact with you. Nick said, I can only stay for so long. There's still a lot of things to do. It's so troublesome. Nick stood up and put on his hat. Frank sent him out, and before leaving, he said, If you can't handle it, call your friend Frank. I don't know what you're going to do, Nick, but I'm familiar with this person's information. He's related to Matthew. I know. Nick said, He's investigated. Frank revealed a very stiff smile. Recently, he's getting close to Matthew. We're both tracking Matthew, but he's closer than I am. Nick was lost in thought for a while and turned back. Thank you for your information, Frank. This is very important to me. Goodbye, Nick. Chapter 1124. The sun was scorching hot in the Mexican desert. Ever since the New York incident 6 years ago, the weather had been getting harsher and harsher. As the climate became more and more extreme, And as the world's meteorological experts warned against global climate extremes, the Chihuahua Desert at the border between Mexico and the United States also became harsher by the day. There were fewer people there, and it had truly become a forbidden zone for life. A figure came running from afar. She was wearing a bamboo hat to block the sun and a loose robe. Along the way, the hot wind blew, and her clothes fluttered in the wind. She looked like someone who had walked out of a painting. She held two strange bracelets in her hands, which looked like a pair of golden rings. Her hair was tied up in a bun, and upon closer inspection, it was a Taoist robe. She trudged along the desert for a long time before she arrived at a secluded wasteland. The place was full of rocks, and weathered rocks were everywhere. The girl jumped down from a cliff and went around to a hidden cave that had been eroded by the wind. There were 3 people in the cave. One of them had a slightly pale face, and his hair was messy. There were faint traces of blood on his body, and he was lying on the ground. He had a full beard, and upon closer inspection, he seemed to be quite young. If Nick was here, he would easily recognize him. He was the weapon master of the Celestial Wolf Blade, Daniel, who had gone missing after the port incident. The other person was a blind old man, and he was very skinny. The last person was also a woman, but she was dressed like a ninja. Seeing that the girl had returned, the woman dressed like a ninja made a standard fist salute gesture. She said, "Miss Lianhua, have you discovered where those people are hiding?" The Taoist nun named Lianhua was also the current master of the Wudong divine weapon, Tai Chi. She had been ordered by her master to go down the mountain to investigate the master of the magic blade, Zheng Shanqi's plot in Wakanda. However, for some reason, she had become involved with these people. She smiled warmly and said, "I followed those 2 people all the way. The place where they are stationed is not far from us. How are Daniel's injuries?" Lianhua sat down and took Daniel's pulse. The one who was dressed as a ninja was Erica, a former assassin of the Hand and Matthew's girlfriend. She said in a low voice, "He woke up twice, but he was still unconscious. He kept saying weird things. He kept shouting at the moon after he woke up, looking terrified. He was afraid of the moon and always said that something was looking at him from the moon." "It's not that something on the moon is looking at him," the old man interrupted. "It's the moon. Although his injuries are not light, his inner force is very strong and he can heal himself. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have been unconscious for so long." Lianhua said, "But his current situation, it's possible that his divine sense is injured, and there's something wrong with his primordial spirit. Iron Fist was injured because he was looking for Matthew." Erica said, "Who are the people who took Matthew away?" Only the old man could answer that question, because it was he and Daniel who tracked those people and were wounded by their experts. The old man tried his best to bring Daniel back in one piece. He said in a low voice, "Those people are very weird. Their martial arts are from the northwest of China, but their voices and figures are white people with large bones." Lianhua also added, "They believe in the Star Moon Church. When I tracked those 2 people, I saw them worshiping. We've been tracking Matthew for so long, but they were still able to take him away before we did. This shows that these people have a lot of power. Why did they take Matthew away?" Matthew's mental state was close to madness at the time, but many people were investigating him. What is the purpose of these people? Is there anything on Matthew that they want? Lianhua shook her head and said, "What they want is not one thing, or they only need to take that thing away. What they want is a person. There must be something important on Matthew that we don't know." The old man said, "Matthew is already." The old man seemed to have hesitated for a long time, before he finally said with some difficulty, "We shouldn't investigate anymore. Matthew is no longer who he used to be. No, it's hard to say whether or not it's still him in that shell. The feeling he gives me is like black sky, if not scarier. Maybe only the artifact that controls black sky can save him. It's not necessarily a good thing for him, or for us if we approach him rashly now." Hearing that, Lianhua's face changed. "The artifact that controls black sky? You mean Dallas?" Erica was even more anxious. She clutched the old man's hand tightly. The old man said helplessly, "Now that things have come to this, I'll tell you the truth. Although there are a few experts among those people, We don't care about them. Daniel was injured because he rashly went to see Matthew. He and I found Matthew together. Why was he injured, but I was safe and sound? At that time, when we approached the tent where Matthew was, there was no one guarding it at all. Everyone was far away from it. It didn't look like they were guarding a prisoner at all, but like they were escorting something dangerous. So, we easily approached the place where Matthew was. After we found that there was no one inside, Daniel went up to rescue Matthew. But when he saw Matthew, his breath almost stopped. I heard his heart beating rapidly, as if he had seen something that terrified him. I thought he had seen Matthew's eyes, and then I heard a roar that I had never heard in my life. It was like a wounded beast letting out a tragic, crazy roar. After Daniel finished roaring, he was on the verge of a breakdown. On the other hand, these external injuries were added one after another when I brought him out of this place. Now that the world is in chaos, Dallas and Celestial Wolfsaber have been born one after another. Lianhua said, "Master asked me to go down the mountain to support the righteous path. I was going to Wakanda to stop the conspiracy of Fu Manzhou's foster son, Zheng Shangqi, but I didn't expect to meet Celestial Wolfsaber Master on the way. He invited me to investigate the whereabouts of the weapon Grandmaster of Dallas. In the end, due to a freak combination of factors, these things happened. It makes me feel like I'm in the middle of a huge conspiracy. The things that I've encountered, Zheng Shangqi's plot to go to Wakanda, the birth of Dallas Magic Blade, Matthew losing control and disappearing 6 years ago, only to suddenly reappear 6 years later, only to be mysteriously kidnapped by someone. The serious Blade Master spirit was actually injured by someone in a single encounter. There seems to be an invisible hand behind all these things, manipulating everything." Lianhua said worriedly, "I'm afraid it's going to be another catastrophe for the world." At this moment, Daniel's body suddenly trembled. He opened his eyes, which were bloodshot. He opened his mouth and roared. He used so much force that the veins on his neck bulged. His teeth became slightly sharp. Celestial Wolf Saber, which was not far away, suddenly hummed and shot out on its own. It fused with Daniel's calamity weapon, True Chi. In the next instant, he and the saber became one and flew into the sky. The powerful saber energy instantly tore the sky apart, its momentum shaking all directions. With this, it was impossible not to attract the attention of the mysterious organization. Faced with this sudden change, the few of them hurriedly chased after him. They saw a saber energy streak across the sky like a waterfall. The three of them quickly followed it. After losing control, Daniel instinctively went in the direction that Lianhua had come from. In the depths of the deserted desert, there was a rather large camp that should have been a dead zone for all living beings. The people who came and went were armed men. Occasionally, there were some ordinary people who were probably family members. These people spoke Arabic, and their flag was a strange symbol formed by 10 rings. In this bustling camp, there was a place that was absolutely quiet. It was a Mongolian-style golden tent. When the patrolling armed men passed by, they subconsciously lightened their steps. They looked at the golden tent with fear in their eyes. Inside the golden tent was luxurious and comfortable. The floor was covered with the best Persian carpet. The person sitting on the carpet was Matthew Murdoch, whom Daniel and the others had been searching for a long time. He opened his eyes. In the place where his eyeballs, which should have been blind, were 2 bottomless black holes. The black holes seemed to swallow everything. There was serrated keratin on the edge of his eye sockets, which looked like 2 sharp mouths full of fangs. Darkness flowed out of Matthew's eyes and spread out, swallowing all the light in its path. It was like the 2 tentacles that stretched out his eyes. A man with disheveled hair was sitting opposite him. He had a very handsome beard, and he looked no more than 34 years old. But looking at his eyes, it was hard to tell how old he was. His eyes shone with the light of wisdom of an old man who had experienced everything. He stared at Matthew and stared into his eyes. Then he tentatively reached out a hand and touched the darkness in Matthew's eyes. The hand reached in, and the darkness seemed to wrap around his fingers. The 2 sides began to tentatively touch, and then they were entangled together like dry firewood and fire. The darkness in Matthew's eyes began to flow out quickly and flowed towards the man. The darkness spread along his arms and surged up the man's chest. He raised his head, and his eyes shone like stars as he looked at the sky. Below his neck, the darkness spread up passionately like fire, as if it was hugging him. The darkness melted the tent above his head, and the man looked straight at the sky above his head. Through the sky, he looked at the distance that ordinary people could not see. Under the cover of the sun, the stars and the moon that had disappeared were so clean in his eyes at this moment. The moon that was full of tentacles and eyes, like a meatball, opened its countless eyes that overlapped with the crater. With malice in her eyes, she stared at the audacious man. With just a gaze, he could completely destroy a civilization with monstrous malice. The man turned to look at the sun. In the sky, the sun was a huge well, and something like pus flowed out from it, infecting the sky. From Earth, this scene looked like the sky was squeezing a big pustule, and the dirty, yellow pus flowed out. It became the sunlight in the eyes of ordinary people. The well of the sun, the legendary source of magic that leads to the well of eternity. The man said, "It actually exists." Chapter 11:25. A strange whistling sound came from afar and approached quickly. The whistling sound came from the sky, like the sharp sound of a gust of wind blowing through a canyon. In the next moment, a streak of saber chi descended from the sky. In just an instant, the quiet and peaceful campsite turned into a living hell. Countless saber chi wrapped in a strange energy. Some were extremely hot and dry, some were wrapped in crushed sand, some were incomparably sharp, and some were like fire. In just a moment, all the militants in the camp died without their bodies intact. The scorching heat roasted them, leaving behind dry and shriveled corpses. The strong wind and sand hit the human body, leaving behind countless tiny wounds that looked like the bites of insects. A living human body was ground into a bloody mess. The strange, genuine chi that looked like illusory flames even caused the human body to spontaneously combust, leaving behind a pile of dry bones. In the storm that blew in the desert, the wind blew countless iron grains on the surface of the desert, and the friction of the iron grains in the geomagnetic field produced traces of blue electric currents. In the storm, electric currents were brewing. In the middle of it was a figure wrapped in silver lightning. He held a long and narrow machete in his hand, with thunder and lightning dancing on the tip of the machete. The man's eyes were red, and his whole body emitted a crazy aura. He held the machete and pointed it at the golden tent in the middle of the camp. The man was Daniel, who had sensed Matthew's presence and was one with the machete. Daniel's Calamity Soldier, genuine chi, had 7 unique properties, known as the 7 disasters of Calamity Soldier. Among them, it plundered all water vapor and caused everything to quickly lose water wherever it went. It was known as the drought disaster. Now that Daniel had lost his mind and was controlled by the Sirius Saber, his genuine chi went beyond the limits of his original body and broke free from the shackles. How could Daniel's genuine chi compare with the Sirius Saber, a heavenly weapon and a heavenly weapon? By accident, he had looked directly at the evil god in Matthew's body. Originally, it wouldn't have been able to do anything to Daniel, who was protected by the heavenly weapon. However, Daniel was a human created by the apocalypse, and his consciousness also had the gate of the soul. After the gate of the soul was opened, looking directly at the evil god broke through the wall of common sense that protected him. This caused Daniel's consciousness to immediately collapse. When Daniel's consciousness was in chaos, the evil god took the opportunity to invade and caused the Sirius Saber to counterattack. Originally, Daniel's consciousness was like a fragile scabbard to the heavenly wolf saber, causing the divine weapon to be unable to unleash its power. The path of a divine weapon was the process of strengthening the scabbard of a weapon grandmaster. However, the collapse of Daniel's consciousness caused the scabbard that bound the divine weapon to turn into a chaotic state. If a weapon grandmaster could not control a divine weapon, the divine weapon would control the weapon grandmaster instead. And Daniel, whose consciousness was chaotic and without any sense of reason, was the best puppet for the Sirius blade. Now that the heretic god wanted to control Daniel's consciousness, it immediately caused the Sirius blade to retaliate fiercely. It sensed the location of the heretic god's host, Matthew, and immediately flew over, wanting to kill that audacious heretic god. The already arid desert environment became even more arid under the effects of the Calamity Soldier True Chi. The dry air was controlled by the Calamity weapon's spiritual chi, and a strong wind swept up the sand, causing a huge sandstorm in the desert. The wind speed in the center of the camp was over 20, and the gas molecules in the air changed their shapes. The friction of the air caused the temperature to rise, which made the temperature difference in some areas even more intense. This difference in temperature caused a larger area and stronger airflow. However, because of the drought attribute True Chi, the water molecules in the air were close to zero. The free electrons produced by the air movement and friction couldn't form charged clouds. Instead, they were attracted by the sand containing iron and other impurities in the wind. The electric current attached to the iron sand. Without the water molecules as a medium to discharge electricity, the energy accumulated thousands of times. In the end, it formed a high-energy electric current that was thousands of times stronger than lightning. The iron sand in the air started to melt. The electric current formed by the Sirius Saber using the iron sand as a medium had accumulated to the point that it could easily pierce through the air and form lightning strikes. The electric current accumulated in the air could instantly shoot out hundreds of thousands of lightning strikes. Daniel lightly lifted the Sirius Saber. Countless bolts of lightning gathered on the tip of the saber. With the saber as the guide, the world was filled with a blinding flash of lightning. The roaring sound pierced the eardrums of those lucky survivors in the camp below. An indescribably huge bolt of lightning pierced through the entire storm. In the giant tornado, the beautiful tree-shaped lightning took root in every tiny grain of iron sand. In the end, they gathered into one and pierced into the ground below. Lianhua, Erica, and the old man saw the indescribable lightning strike from far away. It was not until this moment that Lianhua finally understood why her master said that the serpent was a flood dragon instead of a dragon. Dragons were not the animal totem of the ancient ancestors, but the image that the ancestors deified when they saw the tall, winding, and insignificant things. Dragons were mountains, water, and lightning. They were the majesty of the winding mountains, the magnificence of the winding rivers on the plain, and the majesty of the lightning in the sky. Mountains and rivers were winding, and lightning was a dragon in the sky. The Sirius Saber drove Daniel to launch the earth-shattering strike. The lightning raged like a mad dragon. The tiny golden tint on the ground was instantly vaporized. The only thing left on the remains of the camp was a deep pit almost 1 kilometer in diameter. Dozens of kilometers away, Lianhua and the rest of them almost lost their footing because of the sudden explosion and the quakes. The light and the explosion that were fatal to ordinary people dispersed. Lianhua and the rest of them looked into the distance. Daniel, wrapped in the aura of the saber, stopped in midair, facing the hand that pierced through his chest. Masterman, whose black hair was fluttering in the wind, was floating in front of him, and one of his hands had already pierced through his chest. Masterman slowly withdrew his hand, took out a handkerchief, and carefully wiped the blood on his long fingernails. Daniel looked very stunned. Lianhua and the rest of them, who could only see everything with their best eyesight, found it hard to believe, too. Daniel's strike, in Lianhua's eyes, was already the most unparalleled power since the divine weapons of the Central Plains disappeared. Erica found it hard to imagine such a great power even before today. They had heard of the war that destroyed New York City 6 years ago, and they had seen someone create a satellite the size of the moon and seal another person in it. They had seen the person sealed in the satellite break the asteroid and break free. There was also the strike that vaporized an area the size of the Arabian Sea in the area bordering the sea in Africa. There was the inspiring battle that almost caused the Yellowstone volcano to explode. But these were just news and rumors, and they had never seen it with their own eyes. But the strength of Daniel after he was controlled by the divine weapon left a deep impression on them and made them tremble. But after that strike, Daniel, who seemed unparalleled in their eyes, was killed in the blink of an eye with a palm thrust into his chest. Erica was trembling. She was trembling all over. The blind old man next to her was in a better condition because he could not see it. Lianhua, on the other hand, stared blankly at Masterman, who was calm and unruffled after taking care of Daniel. The fear in her heart could not be described with words. This was Fu Manzhou, the most wanted criminal in the country and once the greatest mastermind in the martial arts world of the Central Plains. Lianhua finally understood why such a person once suppressed the righteous sects of the martial arts world and made it hard for them to breathe, and why Wudong, Shaolin, and Kunlun were shrouded in his shadow for nearly 100 years. She finally understood why her martial uncles and martial aunts were so nervous and fearful when they heard this name. Among the younger generation, Masterman was a stray dog who had nowhere to run after being chased by the government. He was a laughingstock who was scared off by a squad of armed police. But only when they faced this legend did they realize his suffocating power. It was not that Fu Manzhou was not strong enough or intimidating enough, but that his enemy, the government after the change in the sky, was too abnormal. It was so abnormal that even such a person couldn't resist it for one breath. Daniel's red eyes quickly lost their luster, and his face turned pale because of the rapid loss of blood. He fell from the sky, but Lord Man didn't even look at him, as if he was a dead dog. Instead, the serious saber was in Lord Man's hand. As he examined the curved saber, a smile finally appeared on his face. His long fingernails scratched the blade, and powerful true chi poured in. He slashed the saber horizontally, and a huge saber mark appeared in the sky, running through the whole Chihuahua Desert, which could be seen from California. Lianhua slashed the machete, and Daniel's figure fell like a thin piece of paper. She took off a golden ring on her right hand and threw it out. The golden ring spun out, and the true chi formed a ring around Lianhua and flew towards the falling Daniel. Lianhua's true chi ring wrapped around Daniel, and she put a heavenly king heart-protecting pill into his mouth. Masterman saw it in the air, and he just slashed out with his palm, trying to crush the little bug who dared to save people under his nose. But when the palm wind broke through the ring of true energy, he only felt a burst of dense and tenacious, slippery, true energy, diverting 90% of his true power. Although the remaining power was like a hot knife through butter, splitting apart the true energy protecting Lotus Flower's body, heavily injuring her, but the golden ring that had diverted 90% of his true power was able to borrow the force and bounce to the ground. The golden ring broke through the bottom layer and quickly disappeared. Masterman divided a bit of his spirit to search for traces of them, but found that even though Lianhua was seriously injured, she still controlled the golden ring to find an underground water vein and escaped with the power of the underground river. This Wudong girl is quite quick-witted. Masterman smiled and did not think much of it. Getting the serious saber was a pleasant surprise. This small accident could not affect his good mood. With a serious saber, that person can no longer do anything to me. He thought, I didn't expect to encounter such a good thing when intercepting the power of Diabolic God. I heard that the Central Plains martial arts world was pressured by the government and had to give away the divine weapons and devil blades to the young disciples. I didn't dare to deal with them because of the domestic pressure. But here, there's actually one who delivered himself to me. Chapter 11:26. Lianhua woke up slowly and found herself lying on a low couch. She wanted to get up, but her body was instantly sore. The wound on her chest had been bandaged. She vaguely remembered that after she was seriously injured, she rode the golden hoop and escaped into an underground river. The underground water was cold, and she was seriously injured, so she quickly passed out. Now it seemed that she had been rescued. Lianhua raised her head and looked around carefully. She found that she was lying in a tent. As soon as she got up, she heard footsteps coming from outside the tent. A Mexican woman with a flat, Nose walked into the tent. Seeing that Lianhua had woken up, she said happily in Spanish, "Girl, you're awake. The Khan found you by the riverbank and rescued you. Your companion is still in a coma, and there is no hospital here. The nearest town is more than 60 miles away. Fortunately, the Khan knows a little about herbal medicine. He bandaged your companion's wound." Lianhua understood a little Spanish, but South American Spanish was mixed with a strong accent, so she only understood half of it. She tried speaking English. Do you understand English?" The woman pointed to her ear and waved her hand, indicating that she did not understand English. But she got up and called someone over. "Khan, Khan, the girl you saved is awake. The Khan knows English." The woman said, "He used to herd cattle in Argentina and has his own ranch. He is a Mongolian, and he came to South America to make a fortune. He knows how to use herbal medicine to treat livestock, so he made a lot of money." Sigh. Then the head of state came. He came to Mexico to escape the persecution of Hydra, but he left all his family property in Argentina and became penniless. The woman's eyes lit up, and she said, "But the Khan is a very diligent person. He has only been here for almost a year, and he already has a flock of sheep." A man lifted the curtain of the tent and walked in. He was a typical Mongolian, slightly short, with bow-legged legs, a Mongolian-style mustache, a flat nose, and slender eyes. But he was stocky and short. Although he was short, his body was full of muscles. He was very proficient in English. "Your companion is seriously injured," he said in a low voice. "I applied some herbs to stop the bleeding, but the wound on his chest is too big. His internal organs were injured, and he needed better treatment. His wound is very strange. I can't imagine what caused it." This question was difficult for Lianhua to answer. Ani and Khan were both ordinary people. Should she tell them that Daniel was seriously injured because someone stabbed his chest? This was too much of a test for ordinary people's ability to accept and imagine. Khan didn't say much to Lianhua. He only said a few words and turned to leave. Although Lianhua's injuries were serious, she was a martial artist after all, and with the protection of the divine weapon Tai Chi, she could already stand up and move. She observed her position. She should be at the edge of the Chihuahua Desert. According to her aunt, this was the border of Mexico, but it was closer to the United States. The nearest big city was Juarez, which was more than 100 kilometers away. Because it was close to Texas and the Rio Grande flowed through it, it was rich in water resources, so the local people made a living from animal husbandry. After understanding the situation nearby, it was almost lunchtime. The Mexican Ani was making kind of local food. It was made from corn flour and with spicy sauce and ground meat. It tasted very good. Khan was chopping firewood. He took off his shirt, and his upper body was bare, revealing the rib muscles that looked like a bat with its wing membrane spread out. Lianhua noticed this scene, and her eyes lit up. This was the muscle shape that only Asians who trained especially well had, and it was also used by the ancients to describe warriors. Wings on the ribs. It was a kind of anomaly. Wings on the ribs did not mean that there was a pair of wings under the ribs, but that the muscles of a bat were especially developed. It looked like there was a layer of wing membrane between the arm and the ribs. Khan chopped firewood cleanly. In Lianhua's eyes, he had already reached a kind of martial arts realm. This was a martial arts realm that could only be achieved after a long period of very focused labor, mobilizing the muscles of the whole body and moving flexibly and harmoniously. It required an extremely high talent. Generally, such people's labor was equivalent to practicing martial arts, and it was a quality that only natural-born warriors had. Such people had learned to use their muscles reasonably and harmoniously through long periods of labor. They could mobilize the strength of the whole body and knew how to use their strength reasonably. Their strength and endurance were very high. They were even better than martial artists who specialized in external martial arts. At this time, the Ani who was cooking in the empty yard suddenly noticed a car parked nearby. She hurriedly stood up and rushed towards Khan. Lianhua's hearing was extraordinary, and she could hear the conversation between her and Khan. However, the Ani spoke very fast, and her accent was also very heavy, so she could not understand what she was saying. "Khan, those bastards are coming again. The auntie said worriedly. Quickly bring the guest to hide nearby. Khan put down the axe, wiped his sweat, and said, the injured man is seriously injured. He can't move. The auntie was still a little worried. You don't know how powerful the red-haired Bobby is. If he sees us taking in foreigners, he will kill them. When heaven and earth collapsed previously, I already felt that something was wrong. It must be something wrong with the tunnel they dug. Now the red-haired Bobby is very sensitive, like a disturbed lone wolf. He will definitely kill any outsiders who appear here for no reason. The red-haired Bobby was a drug trafficker. In Mexico, they could also be called drug lords. This was a privilege that belonged exclusively to Mexican and Burmese drug traffickers. In other parts of the world, drug trafficking was a very dangerous thing. In Mexico, drug prohibition was a very dangerous thing. Some people summed up the 3 things that should not be done in the world: tax evasion in the United States, drug trafficking in China, and drug prohibition in Mexico. In Mexico, drug traffickers shot prosecutors, stopped the car of college students who went to protest against government corruption, and then slaughtered the people in the car. They shot the tourists who offended them, hung the bodies under the bridge, and wrote a warning in blood. They murdered the family of the mayor who supported drug prohibition, and finally killed the mayor. They killed the internet celebrities who scolded them online. They had their own army, and even after being arrested and imprisoned, they could remotely control their own drug trafficking network. The drug traffickers in the Rio slums of Brazil were famous, but compared to Mexico, it was a piece of cake. This place was close to the important city of Juarez on the northern border of Mexico. Juarez was also known as the most violent city in the world. According to official data, 16,000 people died because of violent crimes in the past 6 years. This was actually only a fraction of the real data. The Mexican government had no ability to figure out the real number of deaths. Missing here was basically equivalent to being buried in a corner that no one knew. The number of missing people was more than 10 times the number of dead. The red-haired Bobby was smoking outside a house not far from Lianhua and the others. He whispered, "How many people saw the tunnel collapse?" "I don't know, boss." A bald shorty under him said in fear. "Creech saw it. Diego Rodriguez de Silva might have seen it too. The lame Franco may have seen it too. And the Mongolian who just came? Khan, that should be his name. He lives in Seresto, and it is also very close to the tunnel." The man saw the red-haired Bobby and raised his eyebrows. He became even more frightened. This meant that the boss had begun to want to kill people. "They won't say anything, boss." The shorty panicked. "They won't say anything. Can you guarantee it?" Bobby hung a cigar. Since the Godfather movie, the bosses liked to hold cigars, even if they didn't really like the taste of cigars. However, the boss could be confused and tyrannical, but he must have the style. This is our biggest channel for shipping goods to the Americans. The entire tunnel is 40 kilometers long and divided into 3 sections. It is to avoid the damn Americans and the damn drones. In the past, we used to deliver goods to California in batches. One truck could only deliver 1 pound at most, and we had to pay the damn customs $1,000. I need dozens of trucks to deliver goods. Chapter 11:27. Now, this secret, there are 1, 2, 3 people in the town. If I don't deal with it, dozens of people in this village will know about it soon. The red-haired Bobby waved his hands excitedly, and the cigar almost poked his subordinate's face. "It's because you damn people are too lazy to maintain the tunnel. I told you, you must reinforce it in time and check the condition of the tunnel all the time. In the end, it rained, and you told me that the tunnel collapsed. A lot of people also found the collapsed pit. I just came from Juarez to clean up your mess. Now you're telling me that they won't say anything? Okova, tell me, is this the attitude you should have?" Bobby said coldly. "But, boss, killing so many people will attract the attention of the police. If the Americans notice this place, our tunnel will be finished. They are very timid. They are very timid. We can monitor them and use their families to threaten them." Okawa hurriedly said, "The people here have families. We can monitor them. It's foolproof." The red-haired Bobby said, "I want it to be foolproof. As for the cops, without the bodies, They won't bother us. This is just a deserted village. They rely on grazing for a living. If they disappear, it won't attract people's attention. There are, another subordinate said, 11 households. 11 households, it's fast. Bobby said, when I first started this line of work, I was an underling. I followed Scarface York. At that time, I was ruthless and made a name for myself. Once I was ordered to kill a cop. When I disposed of his body, I chose a good place, the kind that no one would pass through for a few years. I dug a pit about 4 meters deep. Guys, experience is very important. If you bury it for 1 meter, dogs can easily find it. But if you bury it for 4 meters, few dogs can smell that depth. Bobby flicked his cigarette ash. I found that there was already a body under it. That guy was very professional. He buried it for 5 meters. He even put it in a bag. What else can I say about such a coincidence? I had to fill this pit, drove a few kilometers forward, and dug another pit. Bobby smiled. As a result, I could dug out a corpse after just 1 meter. There was no other way. I had to bury them together. From then on, I knew that this country was hopeless. I swore that after I became a boss, I would think of a more suitable way to deal with the corpses. I fed pigs when I was a child. Bobby asked, have you fed them before? The underlings shook their heads. Bobby knew that they were flattering him, but he still said proudly, I know pigs. They're a group of very greedy guys. A pig can digest 2 pounds of raw meat in a minute, which means if I have 16 pigs, I can make a man, a strong Mexican man, disappear in 4 minutes. First we have to shave his hair, then pull out their teeth. It was my first time doing this, so I didn't have any experience. After that, I touched pig shit for a long time. F***, it's so disgusting. Bobby extinguished the cigar and said, now we have a pig farm. I never eat the pork produced there, but I will let every underling taste it. They told me, Mr. Bobby, this is really a delicacy. I have never eaten such delicious meat. At this time, one of the underlings following behind couldn't help but vomit. Poppy made a sign to the men behind, and 2 of them dragged him out. Bobby looked at his watch and said, I have given him enough time. After that, he took the lead and knocked on the door of the house. The person inside said nervously, who is it? Bobby nodded calmly. It's me, Matinado. You better not let me wait too long. There was a flurry of sounds coming from inside the house. The person inside was very nervous and even frightened. He opened the door, revealing a man's flattering smile. He pleaded, I didn't say anything. Mr. Bobby. The red-haired Bobby walked into his house and sat on a chair in the middle of the living room. He crossed his legs and looked at the man named Matinado. He took out a cigar and cut off the end of the cigar with a silver cigar scissors in front of him. He put the cigar under his nose and smelled it. Bobby looked up and said, Matinado, you did a good job. When Okova asked you, you told him. You reported your neighbors. They talked among themselves. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known that they could link the collapse with the tunnel so quickly. Matinado humbly leaned down and showed a flattering smile. But that's not enough. Bobby said, if you can betray our neighbors, you can betray me. I'm afraid I can't believe you. Matinado's face changed instantly. He saw Bobby pull out a gun, and he immediately screamed and wanted to escape. Then Bobby calmly fired. Before he fired, when Matinado didn't notice, his men had taken out plastic film and laid it on the ground behind Matinado. Then they rolled up the bodies in the plastic film and cleaned it up. Bobby said this just to give his men time to prepare. At the time of the gunshot, the screams of women and children came from upstairs and then quickly stopped. His men continued to lay the plastic film. They set up a place like a tent in the corner and then listened to the sobs coming from upstairs. Bobby lit a cigar, and several of his men came down with people, stuffed them into the corner, and then shot. They drove a truck over. A truck could park about 300 bodies. It was more than enough. In the darkness, the dark red flame flashed from the cigar end. People lived in the remote areas. The gunshots with silencers couldn't travel too far. But Bobby still had people guard the intersection. He asked, which one is next? Who is the most difficult to deal with? His men said, the Mongolian named Khan. He is not afraid of us. Bobby flicked his cigarette ash and said, "Let's go. Let's meet our Mr. Khan." Khan put away the axe and carried the firewood to the storage room. Just as he opened the door and was about to put down the axe, he saw someone standing at the door. It was an Asian, or rather. Chenong saw Khan and nodded slightly. "You're living in seclusion in a good place." "Fu Manzhou." Khan put down the axe, and the two began to talk while leaning against the railing. "After being driven out of the country, your men left Earth, which made us think that you had fled to an alien planet. Just the day before yesterday, your men were all wiped out by Luo Ji, and he didn't find you. At this time, a trace of Fu Manzhou suddenly appeared at the Mexican border. He also has the serious saber and is highly skilled in martial arts. Even if there is any change in style, others will only think that Fu Manzhou obtained the serious saber and practiced the martial arts of the serious saber. As a substitute, he is realistic enough. You even gave him a serious saber," Chenong said. Khan sighed. "He is my shadow samurai. I have many substitutes, but he is the strongest one. He is very ambitious and wants to inherit everything from me. So, I gave him everything, just to make him a scapegoat. The Republic is giving you too much pressure, right?" Chenong said with a smile. "As long as you are still on the wanted list, you will never be safe. You're a patient person. If necessary, you can even hide for 100 years. Wait until everyone has forgotten you, and then come back with a new face. You are the only person who has found a clue, Lord Man," Chenong said. "When you found Matthew, I was very surprised. Matthew was the first person to open the door. He started to go out of control 6 years ago. Everyone thought that Mordo attacked the voodoo sect and opened the seal of death, but only you found the real answer. It was Matthew who opened the door. Azathos entered the door through Matthew's consciousness and awakened the power left behind by death. At that time, I couldn't tell what you knew until you touched another important person. When you found Madame Gao, you immediately triggered my alarm. Madame Gao thought that she was working with Lord Man, but you were actually controlling her through a substitute. At that time, I knew you couldn't stay." Chen Eng's expression was cold, like a villain. "Fu Manzhou, you are very smart. You're the smartest person I have ever met. You once had the chance to become the weapon master of Sirius Blade, but you chose the 10 abstinences. As the last bloodline of the Gold family, you controlled the secret forces in Mongolia. In Central Asia, you established the 10 abstinences gang. In China, you controlled a large group of evil people. In Russia, you have a group of underground forces. Just like your ancestors, you conquered the vast land of Eurasia. However, your ancestors conquered the land under the sun, while you hid in the dark. I have never truly conquered the Central Plains," the Khan said. "The 3 sovereign sword. It is banishing and resisting me. Originally, there were some things I planned to do myself, but your appearance changed the situation," Chenong said. "You know too much. Fu Manzhou. So much that I can't ignore you no matter what. So, I had to come to you and give you a choice to join me, or have all traces of your existence erased by me. I have already decided on the next step of the plan. Whether you live or are destroyed, it will not affect what happens next. You have already prepared a person for me to replace you. I don't care if it is a real body or a substitute working for me." Just as the two of them were talking about the most critical moment, a convoy with a large truck at the tail slowly drove in their direction. A man with a smile on his face and a cane, combed back hair, and a cigar in his mouth got out of the car. Khan signaled. "Something troublesome is coming. Let's go inside and talk." Chenong nodded indifferently. The two of them walked into the wooden house next to them. The Khan invited Chenong to sit down near the table. Chenong placed a Desert Eagle 5.0 on the table. It looked like 2 gangsters were having a conversation. But in fact, the real threat was a planet destroyer in low Earth orbit that was charging its main cannon and aiming at this house. The Khan knew this, and so did Chenong. The Khan knew this. Chapter 1128. Red Fabwa's eyes narrowed into slits, and the skin on both sides of his temples wrinkled. It looked like he was squinting his eyes when he was holding a gun and taking aim. His lackeys who had followed him for many years knew that this was a sign that their big brother was carefully observing and considering. www. Vatu. Calm. You didn't mention that they have guests today? Bo said with a cigar in his mouth. He noticed that Chunong and Kam were chatting in front of the firewood room. He also noticed that the two men noticed him, but they were very calm. It could be said that they were terrifyingly calm when they turned around and went into the house. This made Bo feel that something was wrong. What kind of person is Khan? Which friends does he know? Bo said, I know very well what the identity of their guest today is. Okova was a little flustered. He hurriedly said, the Khan is a Tatar who moved here from Argentina a year ago. He rarely interacts with the people in this village and only rents Celesto's ranch. Celesto is already in his 50s, and he is a Tatar. After her husband died, the ranch could not be operated, so she had to rent it to the Tatars. The ranch is very close to our tunnel. Bo asked. Okova said in fear, the tunnel passes through part of Celesta's ranch. Then why don't we buy it? Bo asked. Don't we have money to buy a dilapidated ranch? And it's such an important place for us. If the police come to check our tunnel, we can drive them out of our ranch. Boss. The man was a little hesitant. Do you think that is a cop? Red Fob stared at the two men who went into the house not far away. He is a Tatar, Okova whispered, and he just came to Mexico. How could he know an American cop? The cops won't recruit such a person. They prefer to use Latinos who want to immigrate. Those people dare to sell us out and then migrate their whole family to the United States. We can't find them, but we have to deal with someone we don't know. Bo sighed. Do you know why the boss of this area has a high elimination rate? How was my former boss killed? Because they always don't understand the situation. Murder. I'm not afraid of killing tourists. Although they come from developed countries and are rich here, in Mexico, no one knows who did it. No one would investigate this unsolved case. I'm not afraid of the locals. I know them well, and I know how to deal with them without being discovered. But killing locals and tourists is a little troublesome. Those D*Ned cops and cops now have the pressure to continue investigating, and they also have clues on how to investigate. Do you know what's the stupidest? Bo took off a cigar and said, the stupidest thing is to kill the foreign reporters and the priests. Why don't I let you kill the priest? Even if he knows something about us, I know some of you idiots like to complain to the priests. So the priests know more than I do. But I can't kill them because of this, because they have the Roman Curia behind them, and the Curia will be fine even if they wanted to fuck a little boy. I heard that the stupidest thing was done by a certain mayor. He instructed people like us to kill a bus full of university students who were about to go to the city to protest. There were nearly 100 of them, and that idiot thought he could suppress it. Let me tell you, idiot, we can slaughter the entire village, but only if the entire village doesn't exist in this country. There's no evidence to prove the existence of the village, so we just need to wrap things up. Everything is legal, and it's safe. So, there can be no witnesses, no photos and videos, and no evidence. I have to guarantee that there won't be any dead bodies for you idiots to go to jail, and you have to promise not to cause me any trouble. He pointed at Lianhua, who had just walked out of the tent. This is trouble. Who are they? Why are they here? Bo said angrily. I don't want us to kill the CEI or the FBI, understand? They won't cause trouble for us because of a few missing Mexicans, but they will investigate their missing people to the end. The underling looked confused and hesitated. Then should we kill them? Surround this place. I don't want to let a single one of them go. Bo put on his hat and a gray scarf. He leaned on his cane and said, I'm going to meet these people. The door has been opened. Soon, the out-of-control human consciousness will destroy their entire civilization. Everything built on rational intelligence, culture, politics, production relations, and their social order will be like a castle built by a child on the beach. When the next wave comes, it will completely collapse. You're not a homo evolutus, Fu Manzhou, Chenong said, but that doesn't mean you can stay out of this. The HPA is preparing to intervene in this apocalypse. We, or the Holy Shield, are the last resort of the HPA before they can officially intervene. Before things get out of hand, I have to solve these problems. The HPA is observing all parallel universes at the quantum level. We know the cause of the matter, and we know the outcome of its development. The parallel universes are heading towards destruction on a large scale. From our observation, The parallel universes scattered across the multiverse are heading towards destruction on a large scale. That's the apocalypse. In comparison, the impact you can cause is like an ant. If there's a real war, everything that happens here is of course a small matter. If the apocalypse moves its finger and the Republic goes to war, when not worthy to be its opponent, the Republic must use its energy to prepare for the final battle. We must use it to deal with the real enemy, the apocalypse. But the cause of the destruction of each parallel universe may be repeated in our universe. In this regard, we are no more noble than any universe. So there's us, the Parallel Universe Crisis Strategy Group. We observe the cause of the destruction of parallel universes, explore the world lines that have entered the end, and then find solutions and preventive measures to apply in our own universe. This is an organization that spans many parallel universes. We're the white blood cells of the multiverse. After each universe is destroyed by the virus created by the apocalypse, we will investigate, research, prepare countermeasures, and form antibodies against the virus. Generally speaking, we focus on prevention. The Republic is ready to deal with the crisis of the collapse of the cognitive world. But now there's a problem. We still don't understand the parallel world that has been destroyed, and we have yet to form antibodies against the virus gate. Whether America or the new humans are destroyed is insignificant to the Republic. In the multiverse, we have witnessed the destruction of innumerable civilizations, the rivers of blood of innumerable lives, and we are constantly watching our existence die in parallel universes. Every qualified warrior of the Republic has long since hardened their hearts. Dedicate everything we have to the sacred duty of fighting against the apocalypse. The blood of the parallel universe has long since been drained. The tears of the warriors have run dry as well. The only thing we can do is to wipe away our tears and continue working hard. To deal with the cognitive attack of the Death Knights, find a way to close the soul gate, or find a key to reconstruct cognition, go to that parallel universe, understand the process of their destruction, and find a way to stop it all from happening. Share it with all parallel universes, and render another measure of the apocalypse ineffective. This is our duty. For that, I will not delay in using the new humans that are about to be destroyed, or rather, do everything we can to save them. You know enough now, Chenong said unhurriedly. If you still won't agree to be a character in my script, I don't think I need to make up my mind anymore. You're dead for sure. Khan sighed. I heard half of it and knew I should have shut my ears. If I refuse now, it won't just be you and your sacred shield coming after me, but the power of the YPG. You have to give an organization enough determination so that it can show corresponding action. Yes, Chenong said with a smile. Before you heard all that, I still needed to submit an application to fire the main cannon, but now that you know enough and have been upgraded to an unstable element of the multiverse, I don't need any permission to order the fleet to kill you. Your arrest warrant has been upgraded to the multiverse level as I spoke. Congratulations, you have a bounty on your head, Lord Man. Chapter 1129. Hey, just before Khan answered, there was a knock on their door. Chenong got up to open the door. He saw a very British man wearing a leather coat and a scarf. He wore black-rimmed glasses, and his eyes were like a tuna that had just come out of the water. Behind him were three men dressed in traditional Mexican gangster attire. They followed behind with their hands on their waists. The man's manner of speaking was very unique. He liked to show his teeth. I hope I didn't disturb you. He pressed the brim of his hat and said, then walked in naturally. His men held him down and glared at Chenong. After coming in, he looked around the room vigilantly. After seeing the Desert Eagle 5.0 on the table, he nervously lifted the gun. Bobby turned back and reprimanded. Relax, relax. Be more natural. Bobby walked to the table where Khan was and sat down. He looked at the Desert Eagle on the table and smiled. An Israeli gun, good stuff. It's powerful and accurate, but the recoil is a bit too big, and it's too noisy, so we don't need it. Khan sat in front of him, looking very relaxed. Bobby could see that this man was really relaxed. When people were nervous, their muscles would tighten. In a relaxed state, The look and the state of mental tension could be identified with the naked eye, and Khan was really relaxed. Bobby observed that when the man who opened the door sat here, Khan was like a focused leopard. His muscles were not tense, but he was still in a state of concentration. But when Bobby sat down, he was relaxed. Just like when two tigers and leopards were facing each other, a rabbit suddenly disturbed them and became the time for the two predators to relax. He felt that the man in front of him even had a playful mentality. This was an insult that Bobby had never experienced before. Generally, wherever he went, even if he met with corrupt high-ranking officials, when they knew his identity, their spirits would be like being gently stung by a bee. There would always be an invisible stimulation that made them keep their spirits up. The big boss of the Ten Rings gang, the controller of the underground forces in Eurasia, the underground emperor, Sir Man, easily and happily faced the Mexican drug lord who walked towards him. Sometimes he could kill 3 people of this level in a day. While having a meal, Fu Manchu would often have to deal with the rebel leaders and mafia bosses who disrespected him in Southeast Asia and Central Asia. Normally, Fu Manchu would not treat these people as opponents or enemies. He only treated them as desserts after a meal. From time to time, he would deal with these people who challenged his authority. Like a beast marking its territory, he would use their blood as a scent and a warning to envelop his territory. Usually, these goods were consumables. Every one of them could maintain their deterrence for nearly a year. Bobby knocked on the table with one hand while carefully observing the performance of the person sitting opposite him. To his disappointment, Khan's relaxed expression made him think that he might just be a sheep that someone was raising. Bobby was very puzzled. He was surprised. Had this person never heard of him at all? "Do you know who I am?" Bobby crossed one leg and put his hands on his lower abdomen. The other side looked very relaxed, so he must be more relaxed than him. Bobby believed that he must overwhelm them in terms of momentum. Khan enjoyed the sudden relaxation in the middle of the strong pressure of facing Chunong. Bobby was the spice that eased the tense atmosphere between the two, which made him willing to take a little time to communicate. Under normal circumstances, the bodies of people who appeared in front of Sir Man would have sunk to the Pacific Ocean. Chunong sat down next to him and said with a warm smile, "Khan, you should introduce me to this friend." Khan said, "Red hair Bobby. He has quite a lot of property nearby. Many people also call me Bobby the Pig." Red-haired Bobby said, "Because I also run a pig farm nearby, but my real business, which allows my brothers to make a living, is to sell some small things to the United States." Lianhua watched a group of people who did not look like good people break into the house where her savior, Khan, was. She felt that something was wrong. Seeing the frightened aunt, she made a shushing gesture and prepared to quietly approach. Unexpectedly, the aunt pulled her hand and whispered, "Run from the back." "Child." Lianhua shook her head slightly. "Who are they?" The aunt lowered her voice and said, "They are drug lords." "Child, falling into their hands is like falling into hell. Don't worry about us. Go quickly. We will be fine." Lianhua saw some people approaching here. Those people had guns, and there was a faint murderous look on their faces. Knowing that something was wrong, when they approached, Lianhua took the initiative to meet them. She lightly flipped into the air, and with a blow, she broke the person's throat. Then she grabbed his head with both hands and gently twisted it. Without any movement, a gangster's body slumped to the ground. Lianhua made a gesture to the aunt, indicating that she was very relaxed and could kill all these people. "You saw something you shouldn't have seen." Bobby said, "You know some of our little secrets, Khan. This is not a trivial matter. It may be a trivial matter for us, but it is not for you, and you also let outsiders. Please allow me to say this. We're like beasts. People who don't understand appear in our territory will make us nervous. Things you shouldn't have seen." Chunong smiled and said, "Khan, you really know too much." Bobby continued, "The most important thing is, where's your friend from? Does he understand the situation in our community?" Khan said, "He is a difficult person to deal with. He works for the government." Chunong laughed and said, "Not at all. I work for the Chinese government. It has nothing to do with the United States. Of course, it is not the Mexican government. This time, it has nothing to do with official business. I just want to deal with some private matters. Bobby's face changed slightly. His expression began to become serious, and he asked Chenong, public affairs. I'm also very enthusiastic about this. What are you in charge of? Public security? Firefighting? Or diplomacy? Neither. Chenong said, I am generally responsible for dealing with some complicated affairs, such as psychics, aliens, mutant monsters, and wizards. Ha ha ha. Bobby and his men behind him laughed. He relaxed a little. At his level, he didn't understand what S-H-I-L-D was, let alone the spear god in the Far East and the newly established Holy Shield. If he knew this, he should be an intelligence officer, not a drug dealer. Then what are you doing here? Bobby asked curiously. I'm here for Khan. He is a famous big shot who once tried to subvert our government and caused a lot of trouble. He has been wanted by us. I accidentally found his whereabouts, so I came to visit. The men behind Bobby laughed even louder. Bobby also became more relaxed and asked, Then what big mistake has our friend Khan committed? He supports the separatist forces of our country, has committed many murders, runs a criminal organization across Asia and Europe, and uses black magic to endanger the safety of the earth. He is suspected of kidnapping Anthony Edward Stark, the famous Iron Man, and is wanted by many countries and regions. Chenong said, He is a famous criminal leader who is anti-human, antisocial, and runs a criminal organization. Bobby reached for a bottle of wine next to him, poured himself a glass, and put his legs on the table. So, how did you catch our criminal master, Mr. Khan? Chenong smiled and said, He knows something he shouldn't know. With his unique, keen intuition, he saw through a plan I was advancing. Obviously, he knows too much. This is not a small matter like a drug trafficking transportation tunnel. So I must come here to warn him. Either join or die. Ha ha ha. Bobby laughed so hard that he couldn't stand straight. Friend, you are so humorous. Then he made a gesture to his men behind him. When he heard the words drug trafficking tunnel, Bobby knew that there was no need to talk anymore. The men took out their guns, and Chenong picked up an umbrella beside him. Khan picked up the Desert Eagle 5.0 that was placed on the table, and 3 shots were fired almost in a line. Chenong put down the umbrella that blocked the splashing blood. He absent-mindedly wiped the blood that splashed on his leather shoes, and calmly said, I never tell jokes. Bobby's whole body was inserted into the chair, and a broken wooden stick was inserted into his chest through the back of the chair and nailed him to it. Dark red blood gushed out of his mouth, and his whole person was still in a state of disbelief. Lianhua rushed in from the door, but just as she was about to jump in from the window, the door suddenly opened. Chenong smiled at her, nodded, and walked out of the door. Lianhua saw Khan sitting in front of Bobby's body, his flaxen shoulder-length curly hair stained with blood. He bowed his head and buried his face in the shadows. Just as Lianhua still couldn't figure out what was going on, Khan's body tilted and fell to the floor. In that instant, Khan took down 3 people with 3 shots. Chenong opened the umbrella, broke the umbrella ribs, and inserted it into Bobby's chest. At the same time, the main cannon of the planet destroyer opened fire. The huge energy instantly came to the top of the 2, but it was distorted by the sudden appearance of a space bubble. The energy that was enough to evaporate half of Mexico turned into a hidden space fluctuation in Chenong's hand. Chenong sent this sealed space bubble directly into Khan's body, blowing up the connection between Fu Manzhou and the other plane. Fu Manzhou was seriously injured, and the 4 small fries finished their mission as an interlude. Chenong left. He wanted to give Fu Manzhou a few hours to calm down, lest he directly give an answer that Chenong didn't like. When I do things, I'm not used to letting others choose. I like to help others choose. Chapter 1130. Wakanda. Amidst the tall buildings of the tribe, Wumuhu, who had no nose, put his hands in his sleeves and calmly faced the front. Beside him, some Wakanda people were hiding in the buildings on both sides of the street, peeping at Wumuhu. There was no one on the street. Everyone had hidden in a safe place when the assassination happened in the palace. But now there was no safe place in Wakanda. On the street ahead, The sound of leather boots stepping on the cement road came closer. Strange, wearing a magic floating cloak, walked on the quiet street and appeared in front of Wumuhu. Wumuhu stared at the eye of Agamotto on his chest and said in an almost operatic tone, "You're finally here, the guardian of the primordial stone. Earth has all the infinite primordial stones in the universe. This is almost a miracle." Wumuhu smiled and said, "But you don't have the ability to protect it." He stretched out his finger and pointed at the eye of Agamotto on Strange's chest. Strange felt the chain on his chest being pulled, and then the runes on the artifact lit up. The eye of Agamotto floated for a moment and then fell down again. "If you have the guts, say that to the Revolutionary Alliance." Strange sneered and said, "Oh, I forgot. Your master, Slayer Lord, is being beaten up by them. He can't fight back and can only send a trash like you to Earth. You don't even dare to appear in front of them because you are really afraid of being trampled by the weak Earthlings." Wumu's ashen face twitched. It was obvious that he had been exposed in an embarrassing spot and couldn't hold on any longer. However, he had strong self-control and would not be affected by this little bit of embarrassment. He still said calmly, "The Human Revolutionary Alliance is not an Earthling. They are refugees from another universe. Try to escape from the destroyer of that universe. The great Thanos is saving this universe. Earthlings, you're also the people he wants to save. The Revolutionary Alliance's escape from the other universe will only bring disaster and attract the attention of their enemies here. It is because of their arrival that so many disasters have occurred in this universe. Earthlings, we are not the source of the disaster. We are the people who are trying to stop the disaster. The apocalypse is the enemy of all life. He created many species, but also cruelly destroyed them. You think we're here to destroy Earth and hurt you? You're wrong. We are here to save you from true darkness and destruction. You indulged in this temporary sense of security, but Thanos discovered the hidden crisis. He broke the temporary peace and tried to stop the crisis, but you blamed him for breaking your illusory sense of security? This was true stupidity. A mortal object. You think Thanos is the one who brought darkness and destruction to you? In fact, he is the one who wants to save you from darkness and destruction. The ones who really bring darkness and destruction are the Earthlings you mentioned, the Human Revolutionary Alliance. Strange tilted his head and said, "What you said makes sense to a certain extent, but I can't agree with Thanos' approach. Hoping to survive by slaughtering half of the lives in the universe and delay the arrival of the crisis is a kind of true cowardice and surrenderism. This is appeasement to evil. As for the Revolutionary Alliance, although they brought the disaster, they stood with us in the midst of the disaster. They have a true fighting spirit, a spirit that fights against darkness and evil. They don't hope to delay the crisis by slaughtering their own people and avoid the battle. The Thanos you mentioned is just a coward who wants to escape by slaughtering the innocent. The balance he mentioned is actually compromise and appeasement." Ebony Ho was furious when he heard Strange's merciless sarcasm. His face twitched, and he said with a hint of exasperation and anger, "Stupid primitive guardian, your arrogance is disgusting. You think you are right and righteous. What disgusting words and actions. As if you are fearless. In fact, you are ignorant and foolish. You don't know how terrifying that darkness is. You refuse to believe in your own insignificance. You think that you ignorant, short-lived, insignificant, and laughable lies have a weight that surpasses the universe. But in fact, you are as insignificant as a speck of dust, an insignificant speck of dust in the universe. You value your lives above everything. But you don't know that you are just an insignificant existence. When it comes to the survival of the universe and the reproduction of life, your so-called will and responsibility are laughable. You think that you're more important than balance. But in fact, you are just a speck of dust on a planet that is like a grain of sand in the vast sea of stars. Yet, you claim that you can compete with the gravity of the universe, as if you can defeat the darkness without paying anything. What do you think you are? What do you think your lives are worth? Compared to the power of Lord Thanos, You are like a speck of dust, but you are still damn arrogant. You need to correctly understand the weight of your race, primitive guardian. You don't know what you are facing. In front of that darkness, Thanos is as insignificant as an ant. He has to sacrifice his true love to save everything. In front of Lord Thanos, I am also as insignificant as a speck of dust. And you, your lives are also so worthless in front of me. I need you to recognize this so that you can understand how insignificant the lives that are more important than the universe are in your eyes. Ebony Ho drew a line with his finger, and a 30-story building next to Strange collapsed. The vibranium skeleton pierced through the whole building and easily killed the lives hiding in the building, the Wakanda people. The blood-stained vibranium alloy skeleton broke through the building. Under Ebony Ho's command, it shot towards Strange. Under the control of Ebony Ho's telekinesis, thousands of tons of concrete from the collapsed building smashed towards Strange. Strange watched as Ebony Throat destroyed a building right before his eyes and killed all the Wakandans inside. He could no longer hold back the rage in his heart. He trembled at the atrocity and could no longer suppress the murderous intent in his heart. However, in the face of the collapsing building and the vibranium rebar, he could only hold up the runic shield in his hand. But the vibranium steel bars easily pierced through his runic shield. They were aimed at Strange's vital parts. Strange quickly opened a portal that was flowing with red sparks. He pushed with his hand, and the portal quickly moved forward, swallowing all the vibranium steel bars that were shooting towards him. You are very angry. Ebony Ho slowly controlled the hundreds of tons of concrete, glass shards, and debris, and smashed them towards Strange. The huge concrete blocks that whistled past easily smashed a large section of the road into pieces, and the violent tremors made it seem like an earthquake was happening nearby. It was full of destructive power, but you'll eventually get used to it. Sympathy for the weak is a true form of arrogance. Putting the importance of those insignificant existences above everything else is an even more irresponsible atrocity. You must put them in a truly reasonable position and treat them like ants. Otherwise, as the guardian of the primordial stone, you have not done your duty. You, who holds the infinite primordial stone, should maintain the balance of the universe. Balance does not exist, and everything attached to it will be destroyed. But you put those short, insignificant lives above the great balance. This is irresponsible to the universe, and you will make a huge mistake. But when the universe needs you to maintain the balance, when the universe needs you to sacrifice yourself, you can't tell which is more important, and this is very fatal. You should be on our side, because we should be working together for the balance of the universe, but you are standing against us. I will give you time to wake up. Ebony Ho controlled a huge piece of concrete and instantly accelerated it to the speed of sound. It smashed onto a Strange runic shield, and the structure of the runic shield collapsed from the impact. Although the runic shield had absorbed some of the huge pressure, the remaining force still forced Strange to take a few steps back. His hands that were supporting the runic shield were already trembling, and he could not hold on for much longer. But if you still refuse to come to your senses, I can only kill you. I will become a better guardian of the primordial stone than you. You are weak, and you're not fit to use the power of the primordial stone to maintain the balance of the universe. Ebony Ho said calmly. His mental strength condensed into a thorn, and he quickly stabbed Strange. Chapter 11:31. Strange had to resist the huge concrete blocks that flew over from time to time, and the high-rise buildings next to him gradually collapsed under the influence of Ebony Throat's telekinesis. Wakanda's extravagant use of vibrating gold alloy as the steel structure of the building had caused Strange a lot of trouble this time. The steel bars that fell from the tall buildings could turn people into gourd skewers, and the collapsing concrete weighing several tons could smash people into meat paste. Ebony Throat didn't even have to spend too much energy. Accelerating a heavy object to super high speed and accelerating a falling object to the same speed were two completely different concepts. The former required him to concentrate, while the latter only required him to add a little force to the original acceleration of gravity. So he had a lot of free time to mess around in Strange's mind. Strange's mind felt as if a red-hot iron drill had been pierced into it. The intense pain made his will begin to blur, and the magic runes on the runic shield in his hand also began to blur. As his consciousness was about to collapse, Strange forced himself to look up and said, "Thank you to the people of the divine realm." Fortunately, the Holy Shield borrowed a lot of useful things from Thor. Otherwise, I would really be in big trouble this time. Thor! Strange roared into the sky. Thor, who was in outer space guarding against the attack of the star-swallowing messenger, heard this call and looked up into the vast universe and shouted, "Heim! Throw him the Agomo orb in the treasury. The one in Father's treasury. Yes, yes. Put on the metal container that looks like an eye, and the crystal-like eyeball in the middle, is it? Don't throw the whole thing to him. Just the crystal ball will do, in case he refuses to return it to us. This way, we can still use the spell on the metal base to summon it back." A dazzling rainbow bridge crossed the solar system from the divine realm and landed in the sky above Wakanda on Earth. The rainbow bridge landed next to Strange, and after the light dissipated, a crystal ball sat on top of the scorched black runes. This was the lost artifact of Kamar Taj, the Eye of Agamotto. It was the treasure of Odin, the god-king who loved to collect as much as the Ancient One. In Odin's treasure room, he had caught a glimpse of it, the one that was mistaken for the Eye of Agomo. Komodo, Samaya, Agemo Shavik. Strange began to chant an incantation, and the Eye of Agamotto shot out a ray of white light that shone on the crystal ball on the ground. After being enveloped by the white light, the crystal ball that was originally unresponsive suddenly seemed to be activated. Its entire body began to flow with a faint radiance, and it floated up from the ground, shining brightly. The light emitted by the crystal ball was pure white, illuminating the surrounding space. Under the illumination of the pure white light, the traces of magic suddenly appeared in the empty space between Ebony Throat and Strange. A formless and colorless spiritual ripple abruptly appeared, distorting the pure white light and causing a shadow of light to appear in the empty space. The thorn-like shadow shot straight at Strange, but gradually melted in the light emitted by the crystal ball. The spiritual spike that Ebony Throat used to attack Strange on a spiritual level did not originally exist in the real world, but it was clearly visible under the illumination of the Eye of Agomo. This divine artifact, that was also from the legendary Archmage Agomo, had the power to break spells and resist magical attacks. The legendary Archmage Agomo was the powerful mage that forged the Eye of Agomo from the primordial time stone. That mage was considered a powerful existence even in the multiverse of magic. Even Thanos, who had yet to collect all the Infinity Gems, could not compare to him. It was a pity that although the Archmage had briefly appeared on Earth and accomplished many things that would affect the future, his curiosity as a mage had led him to think of ways to investigate certain anomalies that had appeared on Earth. For example, the Book of Magic that recorded the secrets of the evil gods, the Book of Darkness that contained the coordinates of all the strange dimensions and the secrets of the Well of Eternity, and so on. In the process, Agomo unfortunately learned of some of the extraordinary secrets of this ordinary little planet. Agamotto, who had suddenly learned of these secrets, was met with misfortune. He was so frightened that he quickly fled to another dimension to become a high-dimensional lord, even losing his most cherished divine artifact, the Eye of Agamotto. Let's not talk about what happened to the poor Agamotto for the time being, but the artifacts he built are indeed very powerful. If Ancient One had the Agamotto orb, he would not have died in the hands of a mere Damu's-kin. Of course, the main reason for Ancient One's death was because he borrowed the power of darkness to sustain his life in order to resist Damu. Polluted, he was no longer recognized by the Eye of Agomo and could not use the full power of the Eye of Agomo. In addition, Ancient One, who believed in the apocalypse and used the Well of Eternity as a part of the source of magic, may also know something that he should not know, so he decided to die on the spot so that his soul could escape from the earth. Ancient One was 100 times more powerful than the current Strange, and some of the powerful magic props he had hidden in a shadow chamber in the holy sanctuary of Kamartaj had not yet been able to use them. Damn Asgardians, Ebony Throat said angrily. Can't the planet devourer make you a little more obedient? In outer space, Chunong appeared behind Thor. He stood side by side with Thor and asked, "Did you give him the orb?" "The orb of Agomo has been delivered to Kiwi." Thor's face was a little ugly. He had no hammers in his hands and could only place them on his sides, which made him feel a little unnatural. "We have imprinted the magic on the other part of the orb box, and located the dimension locked by the orb at the coordinates you provided." "Very good," Chunong said. "The next step is to use the power of the Eye of Agomo to send them over." "Destroyer is ready," Chunong confirmed again. Thor was very dissatisfied. "Don't let me do all the dirty work in the future, okay? Although you have convinced Odin, I don't know if he has gone senile." Thor was a little angry. There was a thunderclap above his head, and Thor roared into the sky. "Okay, old man, I know you're still awake. I will do it. In return, we will fix your hammer," Chunong said with a smile. "You make it sound like I sold them out in exchange for benefits." Thor was still a little indignant. "This is not a betrayal. It's just that they are not suitable to know too much. We are hiding the truth for their own good. You don't want your friends to become madmen overnight. In this matter, hiding it is precisely the best protection for them. It is a kindness. Kindness should not be misunderstood. Before this, I didn't know that the Destroyer could actually put a soul in and let him control that power." Thor's face was very dark. "How did you know? The Republic is the oldest civilization in the world. It is normal for us to pass down anything." Chun-Ong said, "At the beginning of the Earth's birth, there were many secrets. Before the apocalypse and the 4 horsemen wantonly slaughtered in this universe, there were many curious life forms that observed Earth. Among them, there was no lack of extremely powerful races. There was a strange alien race called the Celestial Group that once landed on Earth and gave you native races a lot of pressure. At that time, the Titan God clan on Saturn was still there, the Osprey God clan hadn't perished, the Babylonian God clan Tower of Babel hadn't fallen, Imhotep led the 9 pillar gods, the Brahma God clan watched the natives of the subcontinent kill each other, and the Huasha God clan didn't return to the mortal world. The humans brought from another universe by the apocalypse became the origin of the major civilizations. At that time, the ancient human civilizations were gods, and they controlled the new humans created by the apocalypse from Africa. In their most glorious period, they successfully fought against the mutants in Egypt and sealed the evil gods and famine in the moon, the ocean, and the magma deep in the earth. Unfortunately, the Babylonian Tower eventually collapsed. The ancient civilizations either merged with the new humans, escaped to other planets, or were completely destroyed, or struggled to survive in the depths of the sea. "I don't know about this," Thor said frankly. "Although I am regarded as a god by you Midgard people, when I was born, Asgard was already like this. Asgard and Titan are alien races," Chunong said. "You don't get along well with the gold civilization of the ancient humans on Earth. You can even say that you're being ostracized. If it weren't for the test of apocalypse that united the 9 worlds, you might not have been recognized." After the collapse of the Babylonian Tower, the ancient human civilization was severely damaged. On the contrary, Asgard, Warner, and the Titans retained most of their vitality because their roots were not on Earth. At that time, the Celestial Group once again came to Earth to observe at close range, which made you feel the pressure. So with the help of the remnants of the ancient civilization on Earth, you created an ultimate weapon to fight against the Celestial Group. "This is the Destroyer?" Thor said. "I fought against it, and it didn't seem to be that strong." "You call that fighting?" Chunong sneered. "That was Odin using it as a sparring partner for you. What you destroyed was at best a shell of this thing. Its intrinsic strength is even greater than Odin's. Only the power of Odin and Asgard can compare. Odin used this thing to guard the treasure house and guard against the frost giants," Thor said. "What about the Celestial Group? Why did they disappear later? The celestial group was too suicidal. They brought back some things from Earth, some things that were originally sealed on the moon. The evil gods are not to be trifled with. Later, the celestial group who brought the evil gods back never came to Earth again. As far as I know, they probably died in the apocalypse. Chenong said indifferently, "This race is known for being good at courting death. In the past, they were strong, and the apocalypse was not active. About 3 galactic epochs ago, the apocalypse began to become active, but they were still unrepentant and courted death frequently. Several times, they faced the power left behind by the apocalypse and were seriously injured. They survived by relying on their strong strength. Finally, they provoked Earth, and it was completely over. Now, the grass on their graves must be 3 feet high. It's not a problem." Chenong sighed. Later, the Titans learned from them and led the Death Knights and the Goddess of Death to their home planet for a decisive battle. Your sister also participated in that battle, and when she came back, she went crazy. She was sealed away by your father. Many of the Protoss were either destroyed in the Battle of the Tower of Babel, or died exploring the power of the Four Knights, or courted death and got involved in the battlefield, or faced the evil gods. Only you as Guardians, who are proficient in self-preservation and seeking survival, have survived to this day. But unfortunately, Odin is old, the twilight of the gods is near, and the apocalypse has finally targeted you. I'm afraid you won't be able to survive this." Chenong sighed again and again, as if he couldn't bear it. Abnormally, Thor did not fly into a rage. Instead, he calmed down and thought about what Asgard would face. As time passed, he had already felt the indescribably huge shadow shrouding the fate of Asgard. The prophecy of the twilight of the gods was extremely tragic, but it seemed that the reality was countless times more tragic. While they were talking, the soul of Black Panther T'Challa was stored in the destroyer in Asgard. The armor was made of the same material as Mjolnir's hammer, wrapped in a ball of star-like flames, as if there was a star hundreds of times larger than the sun burning inside. Originally, most of this power was used to maintain its own existence, but with the insertion of a soul, it could be released a little. Compared to the destroyer that Thor faced, the power fluctuations of this new destroyer were more than 10 times stronger. The Bifrost came across the sky and sent the newborn Black Panther back to the moon. Wakanda, with the help of 2 artifacts, Strange finally had the power to face Ebony Ho's powerful psychic power. Even if Ebony Ho controlled countless buildings to collapse and bury him, the power of the orb could still protect him from harm. Strange didn't use the power of the Gem of Time. Only in this way could he be completely free. Chapter 1132. T'Challa opened his eyes. At that moment, even he was surprised. Please Baidu search for the most complete version, the fastest updated novel. He could still clearly remember his crushing defeat at the hands of Ulysses Crow on the moon, and how he was lifted up by the neck. All he could do was stare at his enemy in grief and despair. But this demon who had blown up his mother right in front of his eyes had no expression on his face. His face, made of vibranium, was as cold and indifferent as metal. Then T'Challa's neck was broken. He could still remember the sound of his cervical vertebrae breaking. Crack! The sound still echoed in his ears, and then he fell into darkness. But now T'Challa opened his eyes and saw a rough, bearded face. Seeing him open his eyes, the man shouted, "He's finally awake. Our dwarven craftsmanship isn't bad." Turkara lowered his head and saw only a metallic sheen. It was a set of outer shells made by Asgardian blacksmiths and dwarves from the wreckage of a white dwarf star. The high-density degenerate body gave Turkara the feeling that he could destroy the world if he moved his hands and feet. The dwarven craftsman shouted in his ear, "You're already dead, kid." But at the last moment, Thor saved your soul and let us use Asgard's strongest weapon, the Destroyer, to transform it into a new body for you. You've really taken advantage of that. The Destroyer is a powerful weapon that even the 9 worlds fear. It was made from the wreckage of a white dwarf star, and then stuffed a huge burning star into it. It has the terrible power to destroy the 9 worlds. On the outside, It's an armor made from the wreckage of a white dwarf star, with the image of a huge star burning inside. Now you can say that you're majestic. Who knows how many Asgardian men you'll scare out of their wits, and how many dwarven girls will fall for you. Magni, a tall and elegant man, interrupted the dwarf. He looked like a slender human, and his most prominent feature was his pointed ears. He was obviously an elf. The elf turned to look at T'Chara. His aesthetic was obviously not as twisted as the dwarves, so his gaze could be said to be sympathetic. Not all races think that ugly and ferocious weapons forged from metal are more suitable for their own bodies. In fact, even among the dwarves, your sense of beauty is distorted. Why do you think that a heavy set of forged armor is better than your own body? No wonder your clansmen believe that you have atavistic tendencies. After all, you dwarves were once machines created by the Creator, forging robots under the command of the heavens of war. The elf bowed slightly to T'Challa and said, Midgardian, I am Udian Stormwind from Alfheim. As Michael said, you have died on the moon, but the Prince of Asgard used the Bifrost to retrieve your body. Although your body is beyond saving, we at least have time to save your soul. God King Odin, the protector of the 9 realms, ordered us to send your soul to Asgard's weapon, the Destroyer. We worked together to give you a new body. How do you feel now? I'm sorry I didn't ask for your opinion. T'Chara clenched his hands slightly, feeling the wonderful sensation of his body moving. He grabbed a stone sculpture beside him and stood up. With just a little force, the hard rock of Asgard turned into powder under his hands. T'Chara said in a low voice, It's okay. If I had regretted the death of my body before, after being taught a lesson by my enemies, I only care about power now. Does this body have the power for me to take revenge? T'Chara's expression carried a trace of unforgettable hatred. There was some doubt in Udian's eyes, but before he could speak, Magni said loudly, Young man, you shouldn't worry that this body is too weak. On the contrary, you should worry that it is too strong. Do you know why you need both of us to give you this body? If you only need to repair the Destroyer, Sir Magni can do it alone. But the Destroyer is too strong. It was created by Odin, a weapon used to destroy everything. So if it appears at full power on any planet in the 9 worlds, the powerful mass and energy it carries can destroy that world. As long as it appears, it can completely destroy a planet. That's why the God King Odin had no choice but to send Udian to inscribe magic on your body so that you won't cause destructive consequences with a single movement. To be honest, this body will make any dwarf beauty's legs go weak and blush. Magni said excitedly, blowing his beard, picturing a short, fat, muscular dwarf beauty with a big beard. Udian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. No one wants a dwarf beauty to be unable to move. Udian said, also, being infatuated with powerful weapons forged is the aesthetic concept of you dwarves. And I think that any normal female dwarf would be infatuated with this powerful destroyer, but they wouldn't want to marry a destroyer. Nonsense. Any normal dwarf girl would want to marry a destroyer. Magni said, glaring at her. T'Chara had to interrupt them. How much time has passed? I think I still have an unfinished battle. Magni said, It took me 3 years to repair the destroyer. That kid from Odin's family beat it up too badly. Fortunately, it was only the crudely made shell that was damaged. The Asgardians only made it for show and completely let down the intricate soul framework that our races created for it. I remember that it originally had a stronger shell to deal with the external threats of the 9 worlds. Later, we found that those enemies had mysteriously disappeared. So its original shell was sealed. It seems to have been abandoned in some remote star sector. It's been 3 years now. T'Chara was a little nervous. Udian interrupted Magni's chatter and explained, Actually, it's only been 3 hours. He said that it took 3 years to repair the destroyer, but Odin decided to use your soul to replace the destroyer's command system, so it only took 3 hours to modify it. The destroyer originally had this function. It was also a warrior's armor. Can you ask Odin to let me go back? T'Chara said. The people of Wakanda need their king. Udian said, Of course you can go back. Thor said, I'll check it. He used magic to project an image of Thor. In the image, Thor and the Asgardian army were displayed at the border of the solar system, the Kuiper Belt. The army was on standby, always on guard against possible alien invaders. Thor said to the image, "Udian, look after the man I sent over. If he wakes up, tell him that the decisive battle is about to happen in Wakanda. Let him go back quickly. There's still time to protect his people. I have to guard against the envoys of the planet Devourers and the reinforcements of the son of Thanos, sent by the Thanos tyrant." After reading the message, T'Challa immediately said, "Send me back now." Udian reminded, "You need to get used to your new body. I'll get used to it in battle. My enemies shouldn't be able to destroy this body for a while." T'Challa asked. Before Udian could say anything, Magni jumped out and said, "What did you say?" "Kid, no one could destroy this body." Udian pulled the dwarf, making him unhappy. "Why are you pulling me, long rabbit? Dwarves never lie, but sometimes they talk big. All right, no mortal in Midgard can destroy the weapons I forged." Magni added, "Then let me go," T'Challa said. Udian could only take him to Heimdallr's palace. The Star Castle was built at the gate of the Garden of Asgard, at the head of the Bifrost. Step by step, T'Challa firmly stepped onto the Bifrost. With a stream of countless colors flowing past, he was wrapped up and teleported out of Earth, smashing into the moon. The stream of light dissipated, and a stunned Ulysses Crow looked at the tall armor that suddenly appeared in front of him. The armor was a burning flame, emitting powerful waves of power. T'Challa saw that what appeared in front of him was not Wakanda, the place of the decisive battle, but a familiar ruin. He looked up and saw Crow standing on a crater. Chapter 1133. In the heart of Bonanzana City, thick smoke spiraled upwards. The wreckage of collapsed skyscrapers stood on the battlefield. Concrete ruins were everywhere, and the fiery flames of the crash of the spaceship rose into the sky. Wumuhu floated in the air above the ruins of the city. He raised a finger and rested it under his nose. Telekinesis wrapped around the burning spaceship. With his body as the center, it orbited around him like a satellite. Wumuhu's entire body floated in the void without any resistance. When the strong winds from high altitudes blew around him, they were stopped by an invisible repulsive force and had no choice but to go around his position. The energy weapons on the spaceship overloaded in the combustion. Wumuhu waved his hand, and the explosive energy was converted into a huge kinetic energy, projecting the wreckage toward Strange. He watched the wreckage of the spaceship fly towards him, burning and dripping molten metal. Strange waved his hand and turned the weapon forged by magical energy in his hand, and the messy ruins around him suddenly rotated on the spatial structure, as if looking at the world through a kaleidoscope. Countless geometrical patterns divided the space, and then the geometrical fragments moved, combining, turning, changing, and splitting into a brand new spatial structure. Strange looked up at the wreckage that was crashing towards him, and the wreckage seemed to exist in a different space from him. The two passed through each other without any collision. Wumuhu's figure shuttled through the moving space like a nail, nailing the changing movement of space. The pixelated space around him was restored to its original state, revealing its reality. "Guardian of the Primordial Stone," Wumuhu said slowly. "Where's your Primordial Stone? Why don't you use it against me? I remember when you were weak, you used it to force back the controller of the dark space. Doma, right?" The second warning from Chenong when the Holy Shield appeared in Strange's mind. "Sorcerer Supreme, I've noticed that you're becoming more and more elusive. Even if you appear in the sight of normal people, they will ignore you abnormally, and this is a sign that your presence is disappearing." Strange nodded. "I've noticed this too, and am trying to decipher this sign. This means that you're leaving our world. This is the aftereffect of using the Gem of Time too much. You've drifted away from the world too many times and gradually become estranged from the normal time. Time is a kind of restraint for you, but it is also a kind of protection. You have gradually broken free from the restraint and lost your protection. If this goes on, you will gradually be exposed to those existences outside of time. In the end, you'll be captured by them and dragged out of time. Strange's recollection ended there. But after he left, in a scene that was not in Chunang's memories, Nick Fury appeared in front of Chunang. He was wearing sunglasses and had his eyes closed. He had locked himself in a small box that had no sound, no light, and only darkness. After he came out of the box, Chunang asked in surprise, "The situation has worsened so quickly?" Nick grinned and said, "Yes, I have to inject anesthetics regularly to keep my mind slow. At the same time, I have to lock myself in such a room to reduce the infection of information from the outside world. You have successfully sent me to a hell. In order to meet you today, I paid a huge price." "Strange can't do anything?" Chunang frowned. "He told me a bunch of meditation methods, but it was useless. Later, he beat my soul out. You can't imagine what the hell I am. My soul is like a piece of rotten meat that has been rotting for 3 months, crawling with maggots and mold. It's AF*King hybrid between a human and an octopus. But he still helped you control the deepening of your spirit vision," said Chunang. At this moment, Nick laughed, but he did not say anything. He would never tell Chunang about the method Strange used to help him control the infection. "You should have heard what I said just now." Chunang did not believe that Nick would lock himself in a secret room. If he wanted Nick to give up his control over the information, he would rather let him die. "What you said just now was bullsh*T. Nick said, "Dr. Strange's weak presence is because he is losing the protection of the intellectual world. The wall of his common sense is collapsing, and he has probably seen the existence of many evil gods in the form of magic. He is grasping some chaotic, conscious magic. It is also because the wall of his common sense is collapsing that the normal people have isolated him from the wall of common sense out of self-protection. Naturally, they will ignore him, because noticing him is the last line of defense for the normal person's consciousness. In terms of common sense, it is a kind of harm. The human consciousness will consciously avoid this kind of harm, just like my current state. Many people are even beginning to lose memories related to me. We're like a virus isolated from the normal world. But that's useless bullsh*T, a white lie." Chunang smiled. This excuse of mine can deceive him for a while. Otherwise, once he realizes that something is wrong with him, he will pursue the truth. The more he knows, the more danger he will be in. When he comes into contact with the truth, he will become an incoherent, indescribable, tentacle-covered creature with a bang. The closer to the truth, the more dangerous it is, and he is the person closest to the truth. He may understand everything at any time, but his importance to our plan is irreplaceable. Nick was silent for a long time before he said, "So, it is time for you to act." And I did not lie. I only used the difference in the information to mislead him. Chunang said slowly, "He is indeed losing the protection of time and appearing in the eyes of those creatures outside of time. At this time, those existences outside of time are probably wandering around him. Temporarily banishing him outside of time is also a kind of protection. Let him familiarize himself with that place in advance, so that when a crisis breaks out in the future, he will have a way to deal with it." The dirty deals and conspiracies were hidden in the most secret corners. Strange, who knew nothing about it, had to reduce the use of the eye of a Gomotor, or in other words, the power of the Gem of Time. This left him in a stalemate with Ebony Ho, watching as Ebony Ho wantonly slaughtered the people of Wakanda. Bonanzana turned into a battlefield, and then turned into a huge ruin. Just as they were in a stalemate, it was as if a second sun had appeared in the sky. A burning fireball fell from the sky, the bright fiery light streaking across the sky, like a sizable meteorite crashing into the earth. It quickly swept past the mountains and valleys of Wakanda, heading straight for Bonanzana. Strange and Ebony Hope both noticed this strange meteorite. They saw the fireball fall not far away. It broke through the huge camouflage canopy above Bonanzana's head and smashed into the edge of the city. The shockwave swept through the entire city, and some light things such as prefab houses, cars, and stalls were all overturned by the shockwave. After the smoke and dust dissipated, they saw a human figure made of vibranium smashed into the ground. The destroyer, or should they say, Tekala, grabbed him by the neck and pressed him into the ground. It slowly raised its head and scanned its homeland, its kingdom. Bonanzana was already in ruins. There were the wreckage of tall buildings everywhere, rubble and debris everywhere, and some scattered corpses of the people of Wakanda could be seen. Even more corpses were buried under the concrete ruins. Tekala had to search carefully to find those black uncles hiding in the ruins, looking at their fearful eyes. At this moment, Tekala's entire being exploded. For a moment, he actually forgot about the great enemy in his hands, forgot about his own deep hatred, because at this moment, another kind of hatred had won over it. For Tekala, family was his reverse scale that could not be touched, but his country was everything to him. But right before his eyes, the amalgamation of all the meaning of his life, Wakanda, almost destroyed. The burning star under the destroyer's helmet emitted an incomparably dazzling light of destruction at this moment. From the burning radiance under Tekala's helmet, a tongue of flame comparable to the eruption of the sun shot out. When the sun was at its most active moment, it would emit a huge tongue of flame that could scorch the entire Earth, or even Saturn, which was hundreds of times larger than Earth. And the one inside Tekala's body was a huge star that was dozens of times larger than the sun. T'Challa picked up Crow, who was in his hands, the hollow helmet pressed against his face, and then a destructive particle beam shot out from the helmet, spraying towards the face of Crow, who was in T'Challa's hands. The huge, dazzling tongue of flame engulfed Crow's vibranium body and directly penetrated Earth's core. The Revolutionary Alliance's Earth Defense System in outer space detected that the core had been penetrated and urgently activated Earth's foldable backup system to restore Earth. Then, Earth's Defense System's Information Erasure System directly found the source of the destroyer's information in the universe and was only waiting for an order to erase it. Chun-Ong could only hurry to communicate with the People's Republic and stop preparations for the erasure. More than half of Crow's head had been vaporized, and the indestructible and indestructible vibranium had directly melted a large hole. More than half of Crow's head was gone, and only a small part of his neck and chin was left. Tekala let go of the limp Crow. At this moment, the ultimate weapon against the celestial gods, created by countless ancient civilizations and countless divine systems, had done its job. In fact, even a star tens of thousands of times larger than the sun should not have been able to destroy Crow's indestructible vibranium body, but the destroyer was a special weapon against the celestial gods. And the celestial gods also had an indestructible body. So when the ancient civilizations created the destroyer, they gave it a property similar to Mage's disjunction, which originated from the opposite side of all material existence among the five great gods, the power of annihilation. If it had not been for annihilation, the multiverse would have long since been destroyed by Skynet of War. The power of annihilation restrained all existence. It was the opposite of being, the collection of all nothingness. It was the nemesis of one of the four elements represented by Skynet of War. Mass, energy, information, soul, dimension. These were all the elements of the universe's existence, and the reason why the four horsemen were endlessly entangled with the five great gods. Being and nothingness grew together, and difficulty complemented each other. The opposition between Skynet of War and annihilation was also a certain manifestation of Tao. Looking at the two main culprits in the middle of the city ruins, Strange and Ebony Throat, Tekala was somewhat at a loss. The light of destruction in the destroyer's helmet was getting brighter and brighter. Holding the eye of Agamotto, Strange saw through the heavily protected soul under the destroyer's body. He hurriedly shouted, "Wait, Wakanda can still be saved." The destroyer stopped the beam of destruction that was about to destroy them together, and Strange hurriedly grabbed the eye of Agamotto on his neck and said, "Have you forgotten? We can reverse this time and redeem everything." The two of them instantly thought of the same thing. The people of Wakanda could be resurrected, but first they had to kill this saboteur next to them. Otherwise, if they were resurrected, they would be held hostage by him again, and Strange might not be able to reverse time in this area a second time. The huge body of the destroyer and Strange both slowly turned their heads and looked at Ebony Throat. Chapter 1134. No, Ebony Ho watched as death approached, as if deliberately torturing him. Turkara the destroyer was not in a hurry. He wanted to teach him an unforgettable lesson. Ebony Ho's psychic abilities were completely useless against the destroyer. Unless he reached the professor's level of illusory reality, the destroyer, created by the ancient gods, was immune to psychic illusions and was the natural nemesis of psychic abilities. The 3-inch whirlwind, yanking shoe, huge pieces of concrete whizzed past and smashed into the destroyer's body, but the impact of hundreds of tons did not even leave a mark on the destroyer's armor. The concrete, several times larger than the destroyer, was smashed into smithereens by his fist, and the flying gravel shot hundreds of meters away like bullets. A Wakanda man, probably wanting to admire their king's heroism in killing the enemy, quietly poked his head out, but was unfortunately shot in the head by the flying gravel. Red and white, he shattered all over the ground. This scene was witnessed by Turkara. For a moment, the atmosphere was awkward. He'll be resurrected anyway. Turkara could only comfort himself like this. A king must be decisive. Now, killing the enemy who destroyed Wakanda is the most important thing. At this time, the necessary sacrifices must be made. My shoulders can bear the responsibility of the Wakanda people and also bear the consequences of my mistakes. A good king must not only bear the responsibility of his own people, but also bear the consequences of his own mistakes. If a person tries to avoid the consequences of his own actions, then he will never be a king. Child, as a king, what I can tell you is, don't be weak. We can never guarantee that we won't hurt anyone. The decisions we make will definitely hurt some people, but if we hold back because of this, we can't do anything. This is the responsibility of a king. We are merciful, but sometimes you must be firm enough, firm to the point of cruelty. Turkara remembered what his father had said to him. His momentary wavering then instantly became firm again. Turkara moved. He felt that he was now infinitely powerful. He felt that he could easily destroy his former self with a flick of a finger. This made him a little lost in power. He wanted to vent the anger, fear, and brutality that had been suppressed in his heart. In an instant, the destroyer used a little strength, breaking through the sound barrier and arriving in front of Ebony Ho. A huge shockwave shook Wu Mu's throat, causing his body to tumble and fly out. The destroyer that carried T'Challa's soul was completely different from the destroyer that Thor had dealt with. Not only was it not clumsy or slow, but it also possessed unimaginable speed. The destroyer only stretched out a finger and flicked it. The air at the fingertip was rapidly compressed in a very short period of time and shot out. The white trace of the compressed air exploded like a ballistic trajectory, penetrating Ebony Throat's chest. Blood instantly blossomed, and a basketball-sized wound appeared on Ebony Throat's body. However, the blood that erupted from the wound stopped strangely in the air. The destroyer looked back in surprise to see if it was Stellan who had stopped time, only to see Stellan shaking his head in confusion, indicating that it wasn't him. At this moment, the wound on Wu Mu's throat instantly disappeared. The destroyer felt that something was wrong. It seemed that the cause he had just attacked had disappeared. Without cause, naturally, the result also did not exist. Everything was interconnected. This was cause and effect, or rather, the basis of the existence of determinism. The destroyer compressed air with a flick of his finger, and the air compressed and expanded to form an air cannon. The air cannon hit Ebony Throat's chest when he was being bombarded by the shockwave, causing a huge wound. These linear developments all relied on the interconnection of matter. And just now, this storyline had suddenly broken. A key connection had disappeared. The compression of air did not cause an effect similar to the air cannon, but the gas molecules were moving irregularly in all directions. And this happened in the past. It caused a change in the present outcome. A man in a tuxedo wearing a top hat of the past walked out from behind Ebony Throat. He was wearing clothes that would have fit him well in the last century, but now only a magician would dress like this when he was performing. T'Challa knew that everything that had just happened had something to do with this man. I'm Esteban Corazon de Abreu. I have come under the command of the devil's contract. I want to save this poor noseless man. The man in the top hat said with a smile. He took off his white gloves and placed them on his hands, looking very polite. The devil of Hungary, the devil warlock, the black devil, Stellan said with a solemn expression. Esteban Corazon de Abreu was a descendant of a Spanish noble with a fief in Hungary. He used to be a great Hungarian noble, good friends with Queen Sisai and the founder of Hungary, Count Andrusy. Later, as his life passed, he began to be obsessed with alchemy and tried to create the elixir of immortality. In the end, Esteban Corazon de Abreu reached an agreement with the devil Mephitos and obtained the method to create the elixir of immortality and a lot of evil knowledge. In the end, he held many horrifying bloody rituals and became a terrible devil warlock, the black devil of the mysterious world of Europe. Stellan knew that this devil warlock was not strange. There are many types of magic. In essence, mages were people who borrowed power. Kamartaj and the Trinity of Ulshendi reached an agreement to borrow the power of the dimensions they controlled. The Ancient One stole the power of the Dark Dimension. There were also mages who borrowed the power of demons and used the power of the Well of the Sun and the Well of Eternity. Asgardian mages used the power of Asgard. Voodoo mages stole the power behind the door they guarded. Mages were people who collected energy and used spells and talismans to create weapons or spells. This was Kamartaj's definition of a mage. What really troubled Stellan was that the spells this black devil obtained from the demons were very powerful. Only the Ancient One could beat him, and the current Stellan was still too far behind. This was a very difficult enemy to deal with. Although the Destroyer was powerful, it was still just a weapon. Mages never feared a powerful weapon. Powerful weapons were only worth fearing in the hands of powerful people, and Turkula had never been a powerful person. So Stellan was worried that the devil warlock would not be afraid of Turkula's power at all, because he had no brains. A line of fire appeared on the horizon. As the line of fire grew closer, the roar of an engine entered everyone's ears. Stellan's expression became even more solemn. The exaggerated and sinister-looking Harley-Davidson motorcycle and the burning skull on the motorcycle all spoke volumes about the identity of a newcomer. Ghost Riders. Stellan's expression was unsightly. Weren't they all captured? As long as the Ghost Riders used their ability to borrow the power of hell and travel through space, they would be hijacked by the Holy Shield spatial technology and teleported to a special prison. But what if there were Ghost Riders who had not used their spatial teleportation ability? He could have ridden the motorcycle all the way here. Under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be such a stupid night. But Johnny Buzzeret was an exception. He had driven all the way here and almost missed the final battle. Or rather, he had already missed the first battle, and this was the second battle by accident. Wearing a leather jacket with steel nails, a burning skull on top of his head, a coil of iron chain hanging from his shoulder, and a vengeful spirit burning in his eyes, Mephithus Contractor, the Devil's Agent, Ghost Rider, Thunderbolt Fire Johnny. After parking the motorcycle, he got off and walked slowly over. Not far away, Zhongshang leaned against the ruins of the wall and watched Stellan. A black crack appeared in the void, and the power of the dark dimension instantly alerted Stellan. Then he saw the worshipper Cassius, who had been swallowed by the dark dimension, walk out of the crack with more worshippers of the dark dimension. Among them were his subordinates, the Kamartaj mages, and the worshippers of Domim from other planets that had been swallowed by the dark dimension. Appearing with them was the leader of the 5 Black Radiance generals and one of Ebony Throat's most feared people, General Deathblade. After these people were brought over, the black crack impatiently closed and disappeared as if afraid of something. Like thieves who had completed their crime, they hurriedly ran away before the cops arrived. A line of water flowed along the river. Wearing a high-tech battle suit, Namor stepped on the top of the wave, his trident pointed at the wave beneath his feet. Wadawalker had also come. This time, all the people who appeared were enemies. The true strength of the Alliance of Saviors had just been revealed. The alliance of Mephithus, Domim, and Thanos was beginning to show signs. Chapter 1135. Black-tongued advisor Ebony Throat, Ghost Rider Johnny, Demon Warlock Esteban, General Deathblade, the leader of the Darklight Generals, Zheng Shangqi, the son of Fu Manzhou, Namo, the Atlantean prince, Cassius, the worshipper of the Dark Dimension, and the zealots he led, and the remains of Crow, who was thrown into the ruins. These are almost all the people sent by the big shots of the Savior's Alliance this time. To put it bluntly, this power was enough to overturn a planet. The messengers sent by the Star Swallower were intercepted by the heroes of the Asgardians and the Divine Shield people in the Kuiper Belt. The war was on two battlefields, the Kuiper Belt on the edge of the solar system and the Wakanda on Earth. Strange saw the assembled enemies and hurriedly called for reinforcements. He dialed Chenang's number and told him about the situation. But this decisive battle was originally planned by Chenang. How could he not know the situation? The villains that appeared now were only the subordinates of the big shots of the Savior's Alliance. The part that he secretly controlled had yet to enter the battlefield. After Fu Manzhou recovered, he tactfully gave in. Chenang arranged for him to summon the villains he could control, ready to go up and mess things up at any time. I have people on both sides. Everything is under control. Chenang smiled and said to Nick Fury, sitting in front of him, "This round, I'm playing cards with myself." He had the reserves of both sides in his hands. Whether it was the combat power of the Holy Shield in outer space, the heroes under the Revolutionary Alliance, or the reinforcements of Asgard, or the secret forces of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury, they were all under his control. In other words, whichever hero Chun-Ong wanted to put on the battlefield, he would appear on the battlefield. On the Savior's Alliance's side, their reinforcements, whether it was the Kree people or the Skrulls, whether it was the Planet Devourers or other new big shots who joined the Savior's Alliance, including the gladiators controlled by Lord Gao, were all held back by the people arranged by Chun-Ong. The reinforcements of the Savior's Alliance were all under control. Even the reinforcements of the Rescuers' Alliance, the group of villains controlled by Lord Man, with the bargaining chips created by Chun-Ong to balance the two sides. The card in his hand had indeed reached the level of playing cards with himself. Anyone who could interfere in the battle was either held back by his people or pulled into his own camp like Nick Fury. At this time, the location of the battlefield and the participants were all precisely controlled. Everything was under control. Even if Chun-Ong claimed that he wasn't the mastermind behind this plan and that he wasn't the villain, no one would believe him. In any case, Nick Fury, who was sitting opposite him, definitely wouldn't believe him. He replied to Strange, "Reinforcements will be here soon. Hold on for a while." Strange hung up the phone, the suspicion in his heart growing stronger. His call to Chun-Ong was also a test, but the result was not good. Chun-Ong did not even bother to hide his strangeness. There was no fluctuation in his tone when he answered. It was the kind of confidence that everything was under control, and what you said was not beyond my expectations. It was like telling the world that there was something wrong with him. Now that all the villains had gathered, Strange could not have predicted it. Even if he used the time gem to peek into the future, it was useless. In the future, the probability of such a thing happening was too low. This was not a battle that happened by coincidence, but the result of someone's careful planning. So much so that there was no such timeline in the parallel world. Chun-Ong and Nick were now at the headquarters of the Holy Shield's floating pyramid. The agents of the Holy Shield and the Holy Spear lived in harmony in the floating base. The researchers walked quickly through the pyramid, and the big screen projected all the data of the battlefield that the Holy Shield had used to monitor with the help of the YPG and their own equipment. In a transparent crystal pillar, Little Pepper Pot's armor was in the final stage of emergency maintenance. Black Bat King had put on the bat suit that the Holy Shield researchers had made for him, and Blade Warrior was undergoing sacred silver surgery. His body was armed by the Holy Shield using the results of the vampire's research. Chun-Ong still had time to command them. The sacred silver will form a protective net in his veins, boldly inject blood containing radiation energy. Nuclear blood will not kill him. I have experience in this area. How much computerization has the nerves of the whole body reached? The researcher replied, It has reached 98%. It will be done soon. Hurry up. Otherwise, we won't be able to catch up, Chenong said lightly. Sucking blood is absorbing energy. Human blood doesn't have any energy at all. It's low level and inefficient. Only weak vampires suck blood. The real blood tribe should suck nuclear materials. In order to cater to their tastes, I specially developed this nuclear blood. According to the feedback of the experimenters, there's a kind of numbing and spicy feeling when sucked, just like Sichuan cuisine in the blood. There's also a feeling of high alcohol. There's a back and strong. Chenong slapped the agreement signed by Blade on the table and said, "Don't worry and boldly do it. We have obtained the consent of the experimenter. Even if he wakes up and regrets it is too late." Hawkeye, are you interested in transforming into a vampire? As Chenong monitored the progress, he turned to ask the supervisor sent by S.H.I.L.D. Hawkeye. Hawkeye coldly pulled the bowstring, indicating his refusal. Chenong sighed. Alas, now we are facing the enemies gathered in the universe, and those country bumpkins on Earth are no match for us. What was the use of a mere human body? Why do we have to be human? Isn't mutation and transformation good? Even Steve Rogers has upgraded the Superman serum. Perhaps he will become the most powerful warrior of the original Avengers. And Natasha has the support of Soviet technology. Hawkeye, if you can't keep up with the situation, you may be reduced to an inconspicuous soldier on the battlefield, like Falcon Sam. Although the Skrull imitation technology is powerful, it may not be as good as the original. In the Holy Shield, only you were almost killed by the Skrull piracy, and the agents they sent to imitate you were the worst. If you continue to hold on to the weapons that have long been obsolete in the history of human war, I am afraid there is no hope for revenge. Hawkeye's face was as calm as water. He stared at the data analysis on the big screen and had to admit that a Doman fanatic could pose a considerable threat to him. He seems to have fallen to the extent of relying on his past popularity and qualifications to get by. Not to mention anything else, the Skrull has become a stray dog that was killed by the Revolutionary Alliance, and only a small team was dispatched to kill his family. Among all the superheroes, is there anyone lower than his enemy? Except for the Punisher, this guy's family was killed by the Mafia. It's not because of the Ten Rings gang, a super gang. You know, now even S.H.I.E.L.D. and Vigilante disdain to deal with the Mafia. If you don't have money, you have to rely on technology. If you don't have money and don't want to mutate, then you can only rely on settings. Chenong patted him on the shoulder and advised, "You really don't want to think about it? My transformation surgery is very strong. Soon, I'm going to rely on a bottle of chemically prepared potion to give people the energy of 1,000,000 stars exploding." Chenong boasted, and Nick, who was next to him, couldn't help but roll his eyes. This is no longer a fantasy. It's not even close to science. This is the ravings of a madman. On the other side of the battlefield in Wakanda, the two sides have begun to fight. Strange activated the eye of Agamotto, and now was not the time to be cautious with the time stone. If he delayed any longer, there would be no future. The orb of Agamotto and the eye of Agamotto worked together to create a mirror dimension that covered the entire Bonanzana. And at this time, the portal opened next to Strange. Master Wong and a strong figure in a red and blue battle suit jumped out. The talkative Spider-Man said, "Hey, Doctor, I heard you are in big trouble. It's these people." "Oh, so cool." Spider-Man commented on Ghost Rider's flaming skull, and when he saw Ebony Throat, he couldn't help but say, "Bro, are you Black Demon? Oh my God, your nose is exactly the same as his." Esteban couldn't help but look up when he heard Black Demon, but he soon found that Spider-Man's shout was directed at Ebony Throat. Spider-Man swung his spider silk past Ebony Throat and said, "Are you guys from the same special effects team?" Ebony Throat resisted the urge to kill him with an Avada. His main enemy was still Strange. When he saw the zealots led by Cassius, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Your dark circles are very heavy. How many days have you not slept? Do you work so hard to be a villain?" Mermaid. Spider-Man saw Namor standing on the top of the wave and shouted, But why a man? Chapter 11:36. There are a lot of people here. Spider-Man called out to Stellan. But our reinforcements are here. When are they? Stellan and Spider-Man teleported twice in a row, jumping through the ruins of the battlefield to avoid the pursuit of the people behind them. Stellan had to urge them. If they come a little later, the reinforcements might have time to collect our bodies. But Spider-Man did not seem to hear this. He tried to look back and said, Dr. Stellan, is it really okay to leave that big guy where he is? Stellan said helplessly, he'll be fine even if we die. When will the reinforcements arrive? 10. Stellan's face lit up. 9. The little spider continued. 10 minutes. Maybe. I'm not sure. Miss Potts' armor is still being modified urgently. The alien big-breasted guy is in outer space and seems to be sniping the swallowing star emissary coming to Earth. The archer is useless. Frankenstein seems to be planning to trick him into modifying his body. And there's also a daywalker who has been tricked into modifying. The enemy is already here. The battle has already begun. They're still preparing? Stellan said angrily. Va to calm, the little spider said. The blind old man of Asgard assured us that the destroyer can do it. There's no rush. The destroyer can fight like this for 3 days and 3 nights. So Cyclops and Frankenstein discussed taking advantage of the delay to provide emergency modifications for the heroes and make professional modifications based on the data collected on the battlefield. So the longer you delay here, the more valuable you are, and the more prepared the reinforcements will be. Sounds reasonable, Stellan suddenly roared. Reasonable my ass. Where did they put my life? Why were you kicked out? Frankenstein felt that my chattering was interfering with his experimental ideas, so he sent me down to support him. It's because of that mouth of yours again. Stellan didn't say anything else. He already understood. Although he didn't know why those people at headquarters, including that one-eyed Nick Fury, were so confident in the destroyer, at least they were prepared. It wasn't as Stellan thought. The reinforcements at Holy Shield headquarters were already in the hands of the mysterious and unfathomable existence like Chinong. The destroyer was gradually surrounded by the 7 people. Only Ebony Throat and the zealots led by Cassius chose to chase after Stellan and the others. The others chose to face the strongest. Ebony Throat was afraid of the destroyer. This thing was his natural nemesis. The destroyer of Asgard. The Deathblade General's expression was indescribable. A difficult opponent. Deathblade Raven. Turkara recited the destroyer's battle analysis system. The destroyer could access all the data in Asgard's database, and then analyze it with a powerful battle support system. A qualified weapon not only needed great power, but it also needed great intelligence. No matter which world, the development of weapons was more and more capable of thinking. What do you think Tekala is good for? To slow down the enemy, to prevent the destroyer from being too powerful and accidentally destroying all the enemies. How could Odin and Shun Aang's plan go forward? Your soul resides in the war blade in your hand, and you use the object of your soul as a weapon. What kind of operation is that? Are you an idiot? Who can guarantee that the weapon will never break? Who can guarantee that you won't meet an existence that can destroy your weapon, although it looks quite sturdy? Turkara immediately saw through the Deathblade's weakness based on the battle analysis system. From his perspective, the Warblade in the Deathblade General's hand was marked red, and it would be targeted during the battle later. Turkara said this sincerely. Although he had always been described as a brainless chimpanzee by the racists of the Holy Shield, Turkara felt that the tactics he had learned while studying in England were still very useful. There were more mentally retarded aliens, such as the Deathblade he was facing now. Hiding the soul in the Warblade was a mysterious operation. Hiding the soul so that it could be revived after a battle was lost was to avoid this weakness of the body. But in battle, the weapon would always be targeted first, just like the body. Just look at the fate of those weapons that were claimed to be indestructible. Mjolnir Meowth, which was claimed to be made from the core of a star and the symbol of the thunder god, was crushed with his bare hands more than once. And the vibranium shield, which was claimed to be absolutely indestructible, was snatched away and broken in a parallel world. also more than once. One could not help but shed tears of sympathy for these supposedly indestructible weapons. The Thunder God had trusted Muni Meowth a lot at first, but now he wanted to build a dozen so that he could replace them in Asgard at any time. Was the Deathblade General's Warblade really that hard? But when Turkura pretended to say it, he realized that he could not open his mouth at all. The Asgardians did not install a sound module for the destroyer. Who would install such a thing on a weapon? They did not have a rigid need to show off. The destroyer was as silent as a cold, heartless man made of iron. It cupped its fists and smashed them down at the Deathblade. The Deathblade was agile beyond imagination, and he easily split the destroyer's heavy hammer. Ghost Rider loosened the chain around his shoulders and wiped it with his hand. Hellfire was attached to the chain and burned. Then he flung it at the destroyer, and the chain tied it up. Ghost Rider's hands burst forth with great strength and pulled the destroyer down in his direction. The demon warlock used magic to turn the ground under the destroyer's body into a swamp. It was very uncomfortable, and it was difficult for a strong man to exert his strength in the water. It was obvious that this was a magic player with a brain. Ghost Rider came up to the destroyer and roared, "Look into my eyes." The destroyer had no idea that someone would make such a request, so it obediently looked into Ghost Rider's eyes. Ghost Rider's eyes were the eyes of judgment, burning with hellfire. He looked into the soul of this sinner. Then he saw a burning star. Through the destroyer's eyes, if it was still an eye, it was actually a hollow visor. The inside of the destroyer was actually also a burning star. Ghost Rider looked directly at the star at super close range. Even a masochist wouldn't do this. His dog eyes were almost blinded. Even the flaming skull couldn't help but wail in pain. Its lower jaw kept opening and closing as if it was howling. Someone would actually make such a request, Tekala said in surprise. The destroyer really didn't have such things as eyes. The position of his eyes was actually the window for the star's radiation rays to attack. What kind of spirit was it to use one's most vulnerable part to block someone else's muzzle? The destroyer immediately did as he wished and shot out the sun's breath from its face, a huge tongue of flame that rose from the surface of a planet when a star exploded. The powerful thermal radiation carried a variety of rays, and the ionization reaction caused a stream of super-fast plasma, charged particles, to shoot out from the stellar atmosphere. An indescribably hot pillar of light pierced through Ghost Rider's head. At this point, everyone thought this guy was dead for sure. The demon warlock felt that they had just started the fight by courting death, and the way they died was too stupid. Fortunately, Ghost Rider was essentially an angel created by the Messiah. At least its vitality was strong enough. Its skull had melted, and only a section of its cervical vertebrae was flowing with something like magma. The demon warlock found that Ghost Rider was only seriously injured and recovering, and wasn't dead. The destroyer easily broke the chains binding its body inch by inch. Looking at how relaxed it looked, one could tell that this thing had never trapped it. Ghost Rider lay at its feet like a dead dog. The demon warlock's magic that targeted the soul didn't have much effect on the destroyer. Water Knight, Namor sneered and crossed his arms as he watched from the sidelines. He was simply watching a show. Zheng Shang and Mage Wang fought back and forth, and Mage Wang's melee combat was vigorous and vigorous. Both of them were descendants of Yin and Huang, and there was always some kinship between them, so their attacks weren't ruthless. They could still fight. Odin's prediction was right. Without a targeted method, it would be very difficult to deal with the destroyer. Of course, it was more than enough to protect oneself, but to destroy the destroyer, that was extraordinarily difficult. Deathblade's situation wasn't looking good either. His blade was a weapon, and it had the function of blocking, but if the weapon needed protection, could it still play its role? The destroyer took the opportunity to strike the blade. Its strength was very powerful, even surpassing the current Thanos. After a few heavy blows, even though the blade's quality was very strong, it was still a little overwhelmed. This made the Death Blade anxious. Its soul was hidden inside. It simply jumped and used its relatively nimble movements to avoid the destroyer's heavy punches. Chapter 1137. The Destroyer is doing well. Ong looked at the surveillance screen and said to Nick Fury, "Looks like we don't have to rush to send reinforcements." Nick rubbed his bald head and said, "Let's at least keep our promise." "Then, when do you think we should send reinforcements?" Ong asked in return. Nick looked at the 6 big data analysis tactical response progress on the screen. According to the relevant data and intelligence displayed by these enemies, the ICP Superbrain would come up with a targeted response plan, and the corresponding technological modifications will be made to the heroes of the reinforcements, implanting support tactical systems. Basically, it was Batman's analysis of intelligence, looking for weaknesses and a set of plans that targeted those weaknesses. As everyone knew, Batman had a hobby of monitoring, analyzing, and looking for the weaknesses of his teammates, collecting relevant intelligence, and coming up with corresponding backup plans. His most famous was his Superman's package plan. Even with the body of a mortal, he made Superman suffer. Although there was the factor of Superman going easy on him, the power of intelligence warfare was evident. Nick thought for a while and realized that since the current situation was good, it was better to continue collecting the intelligence leaked by the enemy. Thus, he said, when the big data analysis tactical response progress reaches 100% and the auxiliary combat system is loaded, then send them over. With that, he and Ong looked at each other and smiled. They were in cahoots. At this time, the big data analysis tactical response progress on behalf of the Deathblade general skyrocketed. Nick stood up and continued to pay attention. Ong brought up the system's data, and the 3D projection of the Deathblade general's blade appeared on the screen. Ong glanced at it and smiled. The data collection on the Deathblade isn't complete. The data on the movement system isn't enough. The big data analysis system can conduct behavioral profiling based on the Deathblade's combat data, create corresponding files, and develop targeted combat and tactical deception plans. We still need to collect more data in this area, but the key weakness analysis has been completed. Ong brought up the data and explained, the analysis shows that the Deathblade and the weapon in his hand have the ability to exchange information. Through quantum observation, we found that his weakness is this blade. The Deathblade's soul is hidden in the blade. Once the blade is broken, he will immediately suffer heavy damage. Big data analysis was used to build a model of his blade. Calculated the material structure of the blade, the metal characteristics, and conducted damage analysis. After calculating the fatigue level of this metal and the relevant physical characteristics, we installed the relevant weapons on Pot's armor and the Bat King's bat armor, specifically targeting the physical characteristics of the metal of the blades, including high fusion laser breakpoint technology, cold and brittle metal fatigue technology, and structural damage models. Now, this person is no longer a threat, Ong said calmly. We only need 3 rounds, and we can use tactics to deceive and destroy his soul possession. Easy difficulty. Nick nodded repeatedly. He could only say that it was a beautiful job. The Holy Shield's big data analysis lived up to its name. After analyzing the weaknesses of the Deathblade, Nick was confident that he could send a team of special agents with the corresponding high-tech weapons to deal with the Deathblade. It was not that the Deathblade was not strong. In fact, the Deathblade's combat power was at the planetary level. In theory, he could go against the armed forces of a planet. However, the Revolutionary Alliance and Asgard's joint blockade of the solar system was too tight, and the Deathblade's alien army could not land on Earth. He himself was crushed by the entire Holy Shield organization system. Why did you put Pots in the armor? Nick was puzzled. With the Holy Shield's technology, the unmanned armor should be able to make better use of the auxiliary combat system and big data analysis. Putting a fragile human in it should reduce the corresponding combat power. Nick said, the biggest advantage of this kind of unmanned warship should be that it is not afraid of damage, and it can be used in batches. But Potts can't make use of these 2 advantages. What do you think? Ong said quietly, kidnapping a hostage. I've always suspected that Tony Stark is behind the Rescuers Alliance and the Skrulls. If he comes to intervene, I'll let Little Pepper wear the armor to deal with him. Nick gave him a thumbs up. Shameless, but I like it. On the screen, other than the Deathblade, Ghost Rider, Zhang Shangqi, Ebony Throat, and Cassius, the analysis progress increased a little faster. The other Namor and Demon Warlock did not increase much, mainly because the two of them did not make a move or because the magic data analysis was not effective. But there was also a technology adaptation modulation analysis option on the screen. The Black Bat King's batsuit had been modified with a targeted technology. Chunong gestured. This is the Echo Bat armor we developed based on the Black Bat King's ability. Its vibranium material can turn the Black Bat King's whisper into a sound wave, mimicking defense system around the armor. Echo. If the enemy's attack cannot break through the sound wave mimicking, it can't even hit the armor. Similarly, to deal with the Atlanteans, the armor also has a liquid echo enhancement system to strengthen the sound wave mimicking in liquid, or in other words, in water. The unique structure of the Echo Bat armor can amplify the sound wave emitted by the Black Bat King. Do you know sonar? Sonar is very lethal against marine animals. After the echo mimicking sound wave is amplified, its frequency becomes multi-layered and richer. Low-frequency pseudo-sound waves will destroy the senses of the Atlanteans, causing a fatal blow to their perception and mobility, while high-frequency pseudo-sound waves have a strong material destructive power that can destroy the bodies and weapons of the Atlanteans. Chunong looked at Namor's data analysis and tactical support progress and sighed. Unfortunately, Namor's data can't be collected. We can only perfect the combat support system after we make a move on him. He pointed at Namor's figure on the screen and whispered, Aquaman? I want him to become a drowned person. Back on the battlefield in Wakanda, the Destroyer had taken down Ebony Throat. First Blood. The Destroyer had used his face to destroy Ghost Rider's will to fight, and Ghost Rider had fallen. Double kill. The Destroyer had forced Deathblade into a corner, and Deathblade had escaped. Triple kill. The Destroyer was up against the Zealot, Damu's believer. It was on a killing spree. The Destroyer encountered Cassius, and Cassius used magic, but it was useless. Cassius was hit by the Destroyer's heavy punch, and Cassius was beaten until his face was indistinguishable. Cassius tried to avoid the battle, and Strange added another blow. Beautiful. Cassius had fallen. The Destroyer's pinnacle. It had surpassed God.